Good evening. Welcome to the Village Board December 9th work session. This meeting is now called to order. We'll begin with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our last work session of the year and my last work session as mayor, barring anything surprising happening in the next couple of weeks. We do have a robust agenda, but before we get started, I'd like to invite my colleagues if you have any comments, remarks, or announcements.
So I'm going to just make one, because given the hour that it is, which is, I hope everybody noticed the mask at 200 Main Street on that beautiful building in the center of our village. It is a not too subtle work of art to remind everybody to wear a mask, because while our numbers may have flattened a bit this week, if I have my numbers right, and I know the mayor will speak to it as others will, we're not in a good place. We need to really be careful about wearing our masks, and if you feel not well, to please, we've put things on social media to get tested, make sure that your family is safe, make sure that you are not having gatherings and parties and all sorts of stuff as much as you can during this holiday season. I said one comment, let me add on a more positive note, please shop local. All of our merchants are waiting with open arms. Our restaurants are waiting to see you with takeout and deliveries and all sorts of fun stuff and gift certificates that can be given as gifts. Let's please shop local and support all of our small businesses. Thank you.
Great. Anybody else have any announcements or comments this evening? I see Manny is shaking his head. Bob's good. Omar is with us by phone today. He's got some hectic things going on in his life, so I can't see you, Omar. If you want to speak, I will just pause for a moment and you can chime in. All right.
I'm good. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will speak a little bit about what we've been seeing with the COVID numbers. There has been, actually the last couple of days, we've had fewer active cases and their positivity rate has gone down somewhat. That is good news, only that because we're going in the right direction. We were the worst in New York State for positivity rate. Now we're like third worst or something. So that's an improvement. It also is, it speaks very directly. We saw the decrease in our positivity rate aligns with, about 8 days. We started seeing these numbers go down about 8 days after we had that free testing site at the first one at Open Door, and we have just been expanding testing access for people in Ossining, and we have been increasing the outreach to community members. Thank you to the Ossining Police Department and so many community groups who handed out thousands of masks. Thank you to everyone in the village government and on the village board who has been doing outreach to the community, and whatever access you have to community members. Trusted sources and community groups are really a great way to get these important messages out, which is, of course, wear your mask, keep your distance, and do not attend small group gatherings. It has become clear from the contact tracing that small group gatherings are the #1 way that we are spreading the virus. That's not because your friends and family and coworkers don't love you. They do love you, but COVID doesn't care. COVID will infect any of us, and then we have the potential to infect someone else. And every time we violate these rules, we are jeopardizing our lives, the lives of everyone in this community, and the livelihoods of us all. This has been a tough year. It's not fun to say you can't go out and spread holiday cheer, but frankly, find a way to do it, outdoors with a mask on or virtually, period. Okay. The other big thing that's happening this week, starting tomorrow, we will have our first public engagement session. Tomorrow's will be in Spanish at 7 p.m. And we are really pleased to be working with Matrix Consulting, and the Spanish language consultant facilitator will be leading that conversation. If you are a Spanish speaker, you are welcome to participate. If you prefer speaking English, or that is the easier language for you, then join us on Saturday morning at 11 a.m. for a similar conversation. These meetings will be recorded, so you can see them later if you're not able to attend. There will be a structure to it, but there will be community opportunities for participation. Now, don't worry if you're not able to attend one of these in-person meetings, because there are going to be a variety of ways for the public to engage in this police reform and reinvention initiative. In addition to these large meetings, there will be some smaller focus group meetings with particular affinity groups. We're working with the NAACP to schedule one for the Black community, working on one for the Latino community, LGBTQ community, also reaching out to young people and hoping to have one with young people, and perhaps also with senior citizens to have different, more focused conversations with community leaders and people who are active in those communities to help us understand their expectations and experiences with law enforcement. And all of these interactions will help inform the plan that the village board will put out in the new year for folks to review and ultimately vote on. Don't worry if you're not attending any of these meetings. Some people are shy or busy and can't attend them. We are going to have an online survey that you can respond to. It will also be available in hard copy for folks who are not able to access it online, and that will be completely confidential. Matrix Consulting will be the only ones who see the raw data. Then they will put it into a report that will help us understand what the community is saying and get the message across. That will, again, be helpful information to inform what type of recommendations will be brought to the board for the plan that will ultimately be implemented in the coming year. And there will also, for anybody who wants to share their experience via an email or voicemail directly, you will have an opportunity to share your experience. We want to make sure that people are able to take advantage of the opportunity to express themselves during this public engagement period, which is going to be through the end of the year and into early January, in whatever means works best for you. Thank you very much to the incredible members of the working committee. And there are some subcommittees within that who have been focused on particular aspects of our response to the Executive Order 203, and they have been working very hard to put together this approach and to get the word out, to make sure that anybody in the community who would want to participate is aware of how and when to participate. So thank you so much to everyone who's been working hard on that, the volunteers from the community and our staff who have been facilitating all of this work, and Jamie Hoffman, who really helps a lot with the communication end of all of this. Next up, unless there's something that the staff wants to let us know, I think I'm the first person on the agenda. Anything we need to know before we move on with the agenda?
So I would like to introduce Mayor Gearity, her last work session as mayor of the village of Ossining, to present. She has a presentation on the proposed alternative village seal.
All right, so now I get to try and share my screen. This is my first time doing that. Let's see. I don't see how I can do that, Jamie.
It's at the bottom of your screen where it says share screen.
Yeah.
So if you click on that,
I did.
Then it will have a number of boxes there that you should see your presentation in that one. Do you see it?
I don't. Nope.
Okay, so I have yours. Doesn't have that one thing that you mentioned.
That's okay.
Okay, so I have it here. Sorry, I will go to the beginning. It's not good. Okay, you just let me know when you're ready for me to switch page.
So, go ahead. We are on the first page then. All right, let me actually go back. All right, no, go back to the very first page. All right, so I'm gonna make this smaller so I can see the full page. Alrighty, so we're going to talk about Ossining's double arch. And the one thing that changed that I was saying to Jamie is that this line that says a classic and future emblem of Ossining, I just changed it to the emblem of Ossining, because in doing all of this research, I came to realize that this really is, the double arch is the symbol that is used again and again to represent Ossining to the rest of the world. It's actually an anomaly that we in the village at this point have the Indian head. So we're going to talk some more about that and about why. Why is it such a unique and special special iconic image of our community? Go ahead and click to the next one, Jamie. For this evening, we're going to talk about how we got to this point. And by this point, I mean that at next week's legislative session, there will be a resolution that I will work with Stuart on drafting this week. And the trustees and I will have the opportunity to vote on whether to move forward with adopting the new double arch seal, or if we will continue to have the Indian head as the village seal. And in preparing for this, I looked at a lot of municipal seals and noticed some patterns and some different approaches that were used across, mostly across Westchester. And so I'm gonna share some of those with you, give you a little context about seals in general and how that might inform our thought process here. As I said, the double arch is Ossining's iconic symbol. And so we will talk about that and the fact that we've now been talking about this throughout the fall, and we've gotten a lot of community support. So we're going to be discussing that. Go ahead and click to the next one. Ding. All right. So there we have that young gentleman with me right there is Daniel Aviles. He is a local artist. I met up with him in March, just before the world shut down, which is why we're not wearing masks and we're standing so close to each other. That was March, but though I do remember we didn't actually shake hands. So it was like those 2 weeks at the beginning of March where we knew something awful was coming and we needed to treat each other a little differently than we had in the past, but we really didn't have any idea what the world was going to come to. But we walked down this pathway. His name had been given to me by Bradley Morrison when I said, I'm looking for an artist who could maybe do a pen and ink drawing. And he said, oh, I have just the person to recommend. Danny graduated from Ossining High School, and I looked at some of his work. It was beautiful. He's working as an illustrator now. And so we walked along, we talked about different angles he might consider. He worked from a bunch of different photographs. And then COVID hit and the world kind of went upside down. So it wasn't until late summer when he and I reconnected and I said, hey, what's going on? You know, the clock's starting to tick. I realized that my year is ending and we thought we were going to have all these wonderful celebrations of the double arch because we had our big ribbon cutting early this year before COVID hit for the lower arch, the double arch bridge. And we thought we were going to have lots of wonderful community gatherings. Well, of course, the community is not allowed to gather anymore. So almost none of that happened, except this artwork was completed and we created the commemorative seal, which was introduced in one of my Monday Mayor's messages. That's what the MMM stands for, in October. And then it was shared. Every time I write a Monday Mayor's message, it goes out to a couple thousand people. And then Jamie also links it in the web blast that goes out to thousands of more people and puts it out on social media. When the commemorative seal was shared on social media, it was immediately grabbed up by community members who shared it on other pages. And there were calls for us to make this the official village seal. And so we said, well, you know, I wasn't really sure what path we'd go down, but I agree. I think it's beautiful and it would be a wonderful village seal. So let's see what other people think. And in late September, we released a survey, and it was these two options we gave people. We said, is it time to have a new village adopt the double arch seal? We had quite a good response. Over 1,800 people responded. It was open. It was up for 2 weeks. So we will talk more. We'll go a little bit into a little more detail about the responses in a little while. Right now, I want to take a look at some of the other municipal seals that we checked out and see the other approaches that municipalities take. Here are several that you'll recognize. Some of them you'll certainly recognize the communities. And in these cases, each municipality decided on one image that was going to exemplify them. And I'll just call out a couple of them. I grew up in North Tarrytown, and I don't remember what the seal was when I was growing up. It very likely was also the Headless Horseman, but I just think that's such a wonderful, iconic image. And how could they do anything differently? And now that they're called the Village of Sleepy Hollow, they make millions of dollars every fall. So it's also a good tourism icon for them. I will say I was aware that the town of Rye was actually named for the grain. They used to grow a lot of it. And I was particularly aware of that because it's an ingredient in beer, and there used to be breweries all over this area. And that's one of, I imagine, bakeries and distilleries used the rye as well. The town of Rye probably doesn't grow very much rye these days, although it is still grown in the Hudson Valley, and they have a very simple, lovely seal representing that. I'm not sure if you look at for the town of Cortland, our friends just to the north, that building is probably significant to them. I don't know what that building is. There are a number of communities that use buildings as their focal point when they choose just a single image. And the village of Rybrook is so young. Look, in 1982, the village of Rybrook was formed. I'd be interested to know the history behind that. And I wonder if that bright green tree, which looks like it was drawn in 1982, if that is a tree that is particularly special. But usually a community selects something to be their emblem because it is significant to them and their history, even if others don't know what it is instantly. Like the village of Hastings, perhaps those 3 stars and those 3 diamonds on the outer circle are significant to them, but to us it looks like an eagle. A very similar, just a very familiar image of American symbolism. All right, ding. So next up we have communities that incorporate a variety of images into one seal. I think one of the ones that probably gives you the most information is the town of Lewisboro, New York. They use, they put the shape of their town there, and they list the half a dozen hamlets that make theirs up. I have no idea if deer are special in Lewisboro or if there's history of hunting there that they wanted to highlight. The American flag is certainly not unique to Lewisboro, but they do have a very colorful seal. The village of Buchanan, it'll be interesting to see, now that I've gotten my mind on municipal seals, I'll be interested to see if they decide to change their seal in the coming years with the changing status of Indian Point. New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, North Castle, and Bronxville are all examples of something we see a lot in seals, which is using a shield that incorporates a variety of a mix of images. Sometimes there's a balance of 2 and 2, like you see in Bronxville and New Rochelle. North Castle has 4 different things. It's a little tough to see what they are. I think one of them is like farming tools. One of them is maybe a cannon and one of them is a map, and one of them is like maybe tools that are associated with Native Americans. So everybody kind of has their own approach. The one from Croton-on-Hudson is one of the newer seals. It was created by a local Croton artist, and they incorporated a variety of ideas. The eagle in Croton is more significant there in a different way than a lot of places because they do have Eagle Fest. And the train there is more significant because they are such a substantial train station. The other images, you know, the sailboat and the Native American and music and a leaf are as to someone who doesn't live in Croton and didn't talk to the artist, to me those seem like symbols that would be similar potential concepts to many of us on the Hudson that are waterfront communities, and Native Americans, of course, who are native to America. So they were present historically in almost every community, certainly in this region and in most of the country. The last one I'll mention is the village of Mamaroneck. They have a lot going on here, including 3 words: industry, unity, and prosperity. And industry I found very amusing. They have a beehive. Who knew that beekeeping would be considered the epitome of industry? Prosperity, they have a cornucopia, not just a regular icon of prosperity. And I did reach out to the mayor of Mamaroneck. I didn't hear back from him yet. He's a friend of mine, to ask who are these 2 women holding hands that represent unity on this bridge that I imagine is something significant in their community. So as you can see, different communities, ding, take different approaches to what they're going to include in their seal. And these are the last ones I'll talk about from outside. Oh, no, I do have a few more. But these two in particular are scenes from the Revolutionary War. And they tell stories. I grew up, as I said, in North Tarrytown, so I'm certainly familiar with Patriots Park and the story of John Andre's capture. He was on his way to share information with Benedict Arnold, and he was captured at in Tarrytown. So I believe that must be what this scene is here. If Dana White is listening, she often is during our meetings. I know she wrote a lovely story, because this story of the capture of Major Andre has an Ossining connection, because one of the men who was instrumental in the capture is buried at the old Dutch burying ground in Sleepy Hollow, but his gravestone was missing, and it was found at Sparta Cemetery, and it was they discovered it. I believe it was the Ossining Historic Cemeteries Committee found it and found out where it belonged, and they made the connection, which my father was even involved in, because he's a volunteer for a long time with the old Dutch burying ground. So that's a really fun story, and it even has a little bit of more recent Ossining connection. The gravestone, you'll be happy to know, has been restored and is in place at the old Dutch burying ground. And we have no idea what kind of vandals broke it off and hid it at Sparta Cemetery. It's bizarre. The other one is even stranger. As you can see, or maybe it's not clear to you, but it's the scene of a murder. That is a British soldier killing the first victim of the Revolutionary War in New Jersey. That's Mrs. Caldwell. Her husband, Reverend Captain Caldwell, was a prominent patriot, and he was not home. She was protecting her children, and this British soldier killed her. And it is still significant to the folks in Union, New Jersey, because the Caldwell ghost still haunts them. There are varying stories on whether the ghost is Mrs. Caldwell or Captain Caldwell, but that is the story and the scene that they have on their county seal, which I find quite entertaining. Jamie, next. So here are some representations of Native Americans on seals across Westchester County. They're all standing up. In most cases, there is a Native American and a European who are standing together, often on different sides of either side of a seal. The village of Tuckahoe is a little bit different, and the town of Yorktown has the Indian offering gifts to the European. Probably a little revisionist history, because, you know, the friendship between Native Americans and Europeans was a little bit one-sided, perhaps. Didn't exactly unfold well for the Native Americans. And Native Americans, of course, are everywhere in our region and in most of the country. So but it is different groups of Native Americans. And of course, the image on our current Indian head, which has a different feel to it than these, is not an image of the Simpsek Indians. They did not have headdresses like that. I don't know if these are more accurate for the Indians in the areas where they represent. One thing I particularly want you to notice is we have two versions of the seal of the village of Scarsdale, as well as Briarcliff Manor, and then the two on the lower right, that's New York City. And you'll notice that each community has adopted a concept of what the artwork will be, but they have modified it over the years, sometimes with color, sometimes with a simpler design. And so I point that out to you because, for example, if the village moves forward with a double arch seal, in coming years or coming weeks, I actually talked to the artist and we weren't able to get anything together for tonight about maybe doing a color version of the artwork, or you might want to change the font or the font size of the words on the outer ring. There's variations that can be made and it would still be the village seal. All right, what's next? So, as I said in the beginning, the double arch is actually the emblem of Ossining. It already is. In every seal that goes out for our community, other than the current village seal, you have the double arches. With the police seal and the fire department seal are very similar, and the recreation seal is a variation on that. Instead of Sing Sing Prison, they have some sporting equipment for obvious reasons, and instead of a canoe, they have a sailboat. And the drawings in those three are a little bit more cartoon-like, as opposed to the town of Ossining, which has the double arch seal. And that drawing is, I would say, it's a little softer, maybe a little more fairy tale feeling to it. But then these two on the left, these are both from the village. And when we decided we were going to put out an image to the world of who we are, we didn't put out the Indian head, we put out the double arch. This first one on the left-hand side, Ossining in 3D, was celebrating the bicentennial. We had that fabulous, thank you, Mayor Hanauer and Richard Lyons for putting together that fantastic public art exhibit of 24 or more sculptures, one of which is still in front of Village Hall. That is Dancing Willows, I believe. And the peace symbol, Let's Roll, is the one that is also still with us, that is right in Sasinora Plaza. That was both were part of the bicentennial celebration. There was actually one of the sculptures, which was not a long-term sculpture, just because of the earth-friendly materials that was made of the double arches, and for a little while it lived right in front of the community center. And these two are stylized, really simple versions of the double arch. But I point all of this out to make the point that changing the village seal to the double arch is actually not coming up with a new idea. It's aligning with how we do already represent ourselves to the world. Ding. So here we are with some of the recent upgrades, and the drawing of the double arch that's in the proposed seal now reflects all of these upgrades. But I'll just give you a little walk down memory lane here. The one on the left was taken in the winter of 2014, and that is, I took a walk up the kill while the work was being done with engineer Frioli. And you may not be able to know what you're looking at, partly because it's covered in snow, but the work being done there was such a monumental undertaking because, of course, there is water running down the kill, and they need to be able to get a lot of equipment and material in there because it was a huge sanitary sewer line upgrade. It was, we were required to preserve the quality of water in this Hudson River tributary, to encase our sanitary sewer line in a concrete. And that is actually what you're walking on when you walk on the beautiful Sing Sing Kill Greenway. So to mobilize all of that work was quite an undertaking. That was my first opportunity to be able to walk down in this magnificent gorge in our downtown. And of course, it's a lot easier walking today. I don't need to have hiking boots on for it. So the picture in the middle is somewhere between, you can see that the walkway is in place. What we discovered while we were doing that construction in 2014 is that bricks were falling down from the lower arch. And that's when we realized that there's going to have to be a lot of work. The bricks falling down were actually, they were a harbinger of more work to come, and we are very actually grateful that that it happened and that we had the staff take it very seriously. For a long time, we had that black netting up underneath the lower arch, and that was capturing the bricks. They held on to the bricks and then restored them with the historic restoration. And then I'll take you to that picture on the right there. At this point, we're standing on Broadway right near the entrance to the community center's lower parking lot, and you're looking at the inside of that lower arch. So the lower arch that you see in the middle picture, the inside of it is right there. And while the facade was restored with all the historic details and more historic details to echo what we have on the Old Croton Aqueduct above, inside is all new technology so that this lower arch will be able to keep connecting us through our community for years and generations to come. Ding. Okay, So here we have the finished product of the really the three pathways. The upper one was built in 1837 to carry water to New York City. And it was built largely by immigrants, many of whom ended up residing here in Ossining years later. And it was largely Irish immigrants at that time who created this magnificent feat of engineering to address major health concerns in New York City, not least of which are cholera. And then as a result of having this water in New York City, they thought there'd be enough water to last for a very long time. And actually the population grew so rapidly with this water that they had to even expand their system beyond that. And it is no longer carrying water. And if you have had the good fortune of being in the Weir Chamber and getting some tours, you know what that aqueduct looks like. It's an arched tunnel on the inside there. And what is really special about where its location is in Ossining, and the reason why this is such an iconic image for us and has been even before the Greenway was there, is this is the only point in New York State where we have these two masonry arches at opposing angles to each other, a bridge within a bridge. And thank you, Dana White, our former village historian and future village trustee, for helping me understand the significance of it. I'm paraphrasing a lot of your language as I describe it now. The construction began on the Old Croton Aqueduct in 1837. The construction for the Broadway Bridge began in 1861. And the construction of the Sing Sing Hill Greenway was in 2014. It began, and that was that first picture you saw a couple of slides ago. And you know what? Let's go to the next slide. Ding. There we are, that first picture. There's a bunch of familiar faces there. That's when we were cutting the ribbon in April of 2016. That was a really lovely day. So much of the community came out, and it was the first opportunity for people, at least people who follow the rules, to be able to appreciate the gorge that runs right through the heart of our downtown, to be able to walk underneath the iconic double arch on the Sing Sing Hill Greenway. And so that was 2016 where we're cutting the ribbon there. And Karen, right there, you're not our village manager yet. You are the town councilwoman. That's what you were there for. The whole village board is there. That's John Codman behind me and Quantel in the middle there. Of course, Rika and Minnie. And then also with us is Gail Marchica from the Chamber of Commerce, Assemblywoman Galiff, and Chuck Lesnick, who was representing the governor at the time. It was a really wonderful day to invite the public for the first time to have the wonderful public pedestrian greenway that we have there now, to be able to experience the double arches, this iconic walkway now that exists in the heart of our downtown, and it connects us across our community and our community to the whole region with the upper arch, which is also now, of course, a pedestrian walkway that was built to extend 41 miles. The second ribbon cutting that we have there was more familiar faces. Hey, look. Karen and I are both there again, but there's some more people there. There's Omar, and then there's a whole bunch more people. Jamie, I think you're right off to the left-hand side. I think you were holding the other side of that ribbon. That was early this year, just before the world shut down, that we cut that ribbon on the Broadway Bridge. Two really impressive infrastructure projects. Kudos to Paul Fraioli and his whole team, including Andy Teese, that did so much terrific work on both of those projects. And then I included another couple of pictures just to point out how the double arches and the greenway are so integrated into our community. And we have the pedestrian walkway on the top, and that's the picture all the way on the right. Is you can see I am a walker, not a runner, in the Ossining Matters 5K, and that's why everyone in front of me is strolling. And I took this picture as I was finishing up the walk a few years ago. I think that's Bradley Morrison all the way to the right with his wife. She might have been pregnant with her first child in that picture. I remember chatting with them at one point on one of those one of those walks. It's one of my favorite community events. I really missed it this last year. And the gentleman in the third picture there is familiar to anybody who watches village board meetings regularly. That is Gareth Huffam, who does a tremendous amount of research of Hudson River tributaries. On the Earth Day that happened very soon after the ribbon cutting for the Greenway, we invited the public to walk the Greenway. And while they were there were 3 stations where they could learn about the Greenway and the Kill. Gareth was teaching people about the ecology of the water in the Sing Sing Kill. Paul Fraioli, our village engineer, was teaching people about the engineering, letting them know that they were actually standing on a sanitary sewer line and all of the work that went into it. And it was his brainchild that if we were going to do all this work for a sanitary sewer line, why not, because of its magnificent location, turn it into a walkway for the public? And it has been one of the few things that I've accomplished as mayor that the village gets incredible rave reviews. Everybody loves it. It was such a great use of public funds to make the very most of what would otherwise have been a rather uninteresting, unnoticed sanitary sewer project. Sorry, Andy, you guys do great work, but most people don't appreciate it until you put it in the middle of a gorge and make it a gorgeous public pedestrian walkway. And the third person who was presenting that day, give a little shout out to our former police captain, Scott Craven, who is also the town historian. And he told people his particular area of interest is Hudson River waterways and the Croton River and other connectors in the area. So he had some wonderful history to share that day. It was a really special day, and people continue to make good use of all of the pedestrian walkways. And we were so grateful to have the roadway opened back up. It was a tough several months while that was going on. Ding. And so, as I'll remind people of some of the information about the timeline and where we were and what's going on. Right now, we have engendered tremendous community support. As I said, the double arch seal was originally introduced in October as a commemorative seal for the terrific historic upgrades that were done with the lower arch. And also, that was the timing that we did it, but we really wanted to have some official village artwork that depicts this iconic symbol in this most appreciated and special location in the heart of our community that reflects how it is today. There's obviously a lot of images of the double arches through the years, those on the seal and many, many more that people will periodically post. Dana White's quite a collector of the images of the double arch, so she probably could do a better job than any of us on letting us see the history of artwork of the double arches. And this is what the double arches look like today. I was so pleased with the amount of response that we got. I introduced the seal survey in my village. What did I do with the date? In my village mayor's message the last Monday in November, and I wrote down the date, and now I don't see where it is. And seriously, I wrote down the date. I want you guys to know. Okay, here it is. Nope. Well, I'll just look at a calendar. There we go. Just be patient with me. It won't take long. So we introduced it on November 23rd. And the mayor's message, which, as I said, is shared with a couple thousand folks directly from my email, and then it's put up on the village Facebook page. And then in this case, I also shared just the survey itself on my Facebook page, which several people shared on their Facebook pages and other pages. We also and it was shared in the web blast, which goes to thousands of more people through my Monday mayor's message as well. And we were so pleased. We got 1,817 responses, which is a tremendous amount of responses. And that's one of the things we struggle with in local government, to be able to get the word out. Things are happening, whether it's the comprehensive plan or it's the police reform, things that people really care about. It's tough to get people's attention to let them know something's happening and we want to hear from them. But in this case, people wanted to respond, maybe because it was a simple one word answer, this or that. And the question was, should we move forward with adopting the new double arch seal? And 77% favored adopting the new double arch seal. Additionally, and this is actually really helpful for those of us who want to know, like, who are the people that are responding. 159 comments came in with those responses. There was just an option if you wanted to leave a comment, you know, one of those text boxes at the end of the one question survey. And we got 159 comments, which I did share in a spreadsheet with the village board trustees yesterday. I don't know if you got a chance to read all of them. I have read all of them, similar to the responses that we got, just the raw data responses. They were mostly talking about people's reasons why they support the double arch seal, and or why they especially don't support the current seal, and some people why they want to keep the Indian seal. So it was helpful to read, and I'll just I shared the link for 3 weeks, the 23rd and 30th of November. And on the 30th, I let folks know that it would be open for 1 more week. And then on the 7th, shared it again, and a few more came in. But the vast majority of responses came in the first week. And it was a really robust level of engagement, which I was delighted to see. And as I said, the suggestion here that we that we adopt a new village seal isn't that we adopt a new idea of how to represent ourselves to the world. On the contrary, this actually, the double arch bridge is our history. This image starts in 1837, and it is reflective of the same welcoming attitude we have today of new immigrant groups finding Ossining, in this case, finding Ossining because they came here to help construct the Old Croton Aqueduct, and then which fulfilled the purpose of bringing water to New York City. But it was an amazing engineering feat, and it connects us to communities up and down the Hudson River, all the way down to New York City. And today it connects people who are hiking and biking. And that is the top level of really 3 bridges that connect us, or 3 pathways that connect us. The one in the middle is the one that's used mostly by cars, of course, and connects us across east to west across the village of Ossining. And then the pedestrian greenway that is just such a magnificent escape. Even on a hot day, you can go down in the greenway and it'd be cool and shady, and just surrounded by the beautiful Sing Sing Kill Gorge. And we look forward to that greenway connecting people in the not too distant future to all the way down to the waterfront district. It is the symbol that we turn to again and again to represent Ossining, and I really look forward to being able to vote next week. And click, ding. Oh no, there's one more. Right, so here's the December 16th vote. And so then I guess my question to my colleagues, I haven't asked my colleagues their opinion in a little while. So I don't know, they don't have to share it tonight, but my question would be, what more do you need to see or hear to vote in support of the double arch seal? And with that, I would say, Jamie, would you please let us all see each other?
Thank you, Mayor. I can go next. So I prepared a little statement. So we've seen that fellow community members have written really passionate pleas in favor of changing the village seal from the Indian head to the double arch. And their arguments have been based on history and progress and equity. And I agree with them. You know, I also found that the survey comments were consistently in favor with changing the seal. And as you said, Mayor, we published it on Facebook. It was really notable, the number of people that thought that we had actually already changed it to the double arch, and that was the announcement. So that was really surprising. But there are 3 arguments to me that really stand out as complementary to those that I've seen in emails and in comments that I think I'd like to make tonight. So they are: there is no good time, now is not then, and there is no neutral option. So the first, there is no good time. One of the most common responses that I've heard in response to the common argument in favor of changing the seal is that this is not the right time. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and it's ravaged the health and wealth of our community. After the recent presidential election, polarization is at an all-time high. Why distract the conversation from these important issues with a topic like this? But there is no good time. This reminds me of when I was in my 20s. One of the questions I was wrestling with most was when to have children. I didn't want to have them too early and not feel ready for the responsibility, and I didn't want to have them too late and feel like I didn't have the energy to be there for them. But the wisest and most common response that I got from people who had children was, there is no good time. Making a decision like having children is done in the midst of life, not an aside to it. Similarly, there is no good time to make a decision like this. As long as the Indian head is the seal of the village, there will always be folks who have memories of it as a child. After the worst of the pandemic is behind us, we will be recovering from its effects for years to come. Even after that, if there was nothing else that went wrong, one could make the argument that we just went through a difficult period and are in good times. Why ruin it with a potentially divisive decision like this? Yet we know what's coming. Climate change and incidents of racial injustice, economic issues. There is no good time. This is a decision we make in the midst of life, not as an aside to it. Now is not then. This year has brought with it widespread challenges for our community, and we grieve the loss of the people who have passed, businesses that have closed, and the events that have been canceled. With that, we started to use some of the language of grief that is usually reserved for those experiencing the loss of a loved one. We are in a new normal. We are in this together. This month, December 2020, is a unique time in our history. It's distinct from 2002, when the schools changed their mascot from the Indians to Ossining Pride. It's distinct from 1950, when the Indian head seal was created. It's distinct from 1901, when the village changed its name from Sing Sing to Ossining to distance itself from the correctional facility. These are all times when the village has made a choice to change the way it identifies. Many folks in the community remember the challenges that those decisions brought up and wish to avoid bringing that back up unnecessarily. But now is not then. We are in a new normal. We are in this together. We can make decisions like changing the village seal without the dynamics of the past. The overwhelmingly positive response on the survey shows that. The support from lifelong Ossining residents that were in support of keeping the Indian mascot 2 decades ago shows that. The pandemic, the fight for racial justice, the politics of 2020, they've changed us. How could they not? Every aspect of our lives has been interrupted for the last year. I would argue that this has made us more ready for a change like this, not less. Now is not then. And there is no neutral option. Another rational response to this question might be to sit out completely, abstain from taking a position one way or another. However, there are only 2 choices before us: change the seal to the double arch or keep the Indian head. Howard Zinn told us that you can't be neutral on a moving train. The momentum of history has brought us to this point, and we must decide where we stand. Given this, what is this really about? Anyone who has been in a relationship knows the experience of arguing over something relatively small that represents deeper feelings. I think that this isn't actually about changing the seal. It's about people who have lived here their entire lives and want to be seen and heard and respected. The nearly 5,000 members of the You Grew Up in Ossining If Facebook group, they spend their time sharing memories of the village they love and remember. There is value in holding on to our history. But it's also about people who see the disconnect between the values we profess and having an opportunity to align those values with a unifying symbol. And as we turn the page of history, let's remember where we came from. We're not erasing the Indian head seal, but putting it in its rightful place alongside the other symbols of our past. After all, there is no neutral option. That's it.
Thank you for those very passionate and thoughtful remarks, Trustee Lopez. Would anybody else like to comment?
I guess I could go next. so there's been some questions, I guess, for some members in the community that got not that many phone calls, not that many emails. But this is what they questioned this. Who requested this? Who requested a seal? Why is that the only choice that seal of the double arches are? And what can the public, one of the things that I guess someone did ask me early today when I was approaching to the meeting is, what is the validation of the survey? Who actually those individuals were who answered the survey? Who can validate they're actually residents of the village of Ossining? So I didn't have any of those answers for them. So maybe, Mayor, when you first presented the seal a couple months back, there was two options. One sort of, I want to call it black and white shirt, and the other one more like the black color. And I like the seal. Personally, I like the seal. I like the seal, and I like the concept of how you started this, the whole process of creating the seal in regards to the double arch and the Sing Kill walk and everything else. And as a commemorative seal, I think has, I said I agree with that. I'm not sure, and I thank Omar for the very passionate and thoughtful speech that he made. But sometimes, again, we are responding to what? Sometimes we usually respond to something, sure. So what are we responding to? Because I was questioning this and I couldn't answer. So I'm not sure if anybody of my colleagues or anybody in the board has those answers. As for the public itself, maybe they will. I'm looking at the attendance. Not that many people, are in attendance to hear, and I'm curious myself to see, how do we validate the 1,800 responses that you had for the survey?
So, Manny, the survey is like anything else that we put out to the public when we ask their opinion on things, whether it's, comment on the comp plan or anything else. And it was put out there to see what sort of reaction we got, and was shared on Ossining vehicles by Ossining residents, the mayor, the village, and other people on Ossining pages. And it's not a scientific survey. It's an opinion poll. It's, hey, tell us what you think. If it had been 51-49, I would say it would tell us nothing, but it wasn't. And it was also shared on the Indians Forever Facebook page. I'm forgetting what the exact name of it is, but that's the tagline. And so people who are very likely supportive of the Indian head seal continuing, we're well aware of it as well. And I put it out after having a conversation with you, Manny, when you said, I want to know what the public thinks. I want to know what the community thinks. You don't have much time. How can you get some feedback? We reach out to the public all the time, and sometimes it's crickets out there. Mostly it's crickets out there. And this time it wasn't. It's whether it's 1,817 people and if they all live in Ossining, we don't know, but we do know that it was shared spontaneously as soon as it was introduced by community members, people I don't even know, on various Facebook pages, saying how much they loved it and it should become the official seal. And when the survey came out, I shared it on my mayor's page. I don't share things on the other Ossining pages, but a lot of other people did. And so there was a groundswell of support from the community, and it was overwhelmingly. It's not like, I looked at the numbers periodically. The double arch numbers were always dramatically higher than the Indian head seal on numbers. So, and as far as where did this come from, I don't know, I guess everybody gets different phone calls and different emails from different people. I probably get, just because of my title, I probably get more from people that I don't know than most people do. This year in particular, as there was a reckoning of racial justice in the country, well, I'll give it one question that was asked to me is when we were putting out statements in the wake of George Floyd, people said to me, how can you be putting out a statement about racial justice with a symbol that that person, and I know that other people do not see it this way, but many people do. There is a history of Indian heads on spikes and being utilized as Indians being utilized as caricatures, and that it is not a sign of respect. And that is how many people feel it. I chose not to focus on that because I know there are people in our community who also feel a great nostalgia for that particular symbol because they grew up with it and they see it and they remember growing up and being with their friends, with Indians forever as something that feels warm to them. I didn't focus on that in my presentation today, and really that's really not where my conclusion has come to as I've thought about this over the last few months. It's that the double arch represents our history and our community much better. It's what we use as our symbol all over the place. And when we hired designers to create images of our community, we didn't have big questions on what it should be. It was just, okay, it's going to be the double arch. Let's do these stylized images of it. And as far as what image of the double arch, that's why I made the point to you tonight. When you look at some of the other seals that other communities have, I showed you a few examples. There are more where they have, over the years, modified exactly how they present the artwork. They've modified the drawing, they've simplified it, they've colored it, they've changed the border of it. All of that can be done over the years. So this work of art is, I think, beautiful, but it's not to say that it can't be modified. Bob or Rika, would you like to ask any questions or comment? It looks like you're speaking, but you're muted.
I said that I found the presentation really interesting. I have a lot of questions about it, but I'm going to hold my commentary till we vote on it.
I stand in the same position. Vice President.
You're breaking up a little bit there, Bob. I heard that you stand in the same position, so I guess you want to comment more next week. Is there anything else?
No.
Okay. All right. Does anybody else have any further comments? Otherwise, I'll throw it back to the manager. All right, Manager Dettori, thank you very much. And I want to thank Jamie Hoffman for helping take all of my—
Excuse me. How many votes do you need to bring it up to a resolution for next week?
I'm the mayor. I can just put it on the agenda.
Great. So is this going to go as a resolution? What number is the resolution, Stuart?
No, they don't number. We don't number resolutions.
It's not like a local law, Deputy Mayor. It's just going to be like a resolution.
Oh, it's just, okay. Great.
All right, Jamie Hoffman, thank you very much for helping to take all of my pictures and words and make them pretty and neat and easier on the eyes than as I created it last night. Much appreciate your technological skills. Madam Manager.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Next up, we have proposed local law 10, 2020. This is a law to discuss, to make rather administrative adjustments, for variances to streamline, in the interest of streamlining our zoning process. So I'd like to turn that over to Corporation Counsel Kahan and our director of I'm sorry, I'm not speaking correctly tonight. Our head building inspector, Joe Agostinelli.
Our main building inspector.
Our building.
Our building inspector. That's the civil service title. Good evening, folks. We had discussed local law 10 a while back. I think probably pre-pandemic, if I remember correctly. This was to include a section in the village code under the zoning code for administrative adjustments. And it would, in effect, allow the building inspector to grant certain adjustments or certain variances based upon our bulk table in terms of setbacks. Basically, if it's within 10%, wouldn't have to go to the zoning board. It also would extend the time for variances from the current 6 months to a year, and would then be consistent with what we have for site plan approval, which is you could get 2 additional 1-year extensions. I realize that the discussion of local law 10, next local law 9, and a little later local law 8, in reality, all those are going to become, in some order, local laws 1, 2, and 3 proposed of 2021, because they do need some revision. We have not called for public hearings. We are in the middle of a public hearing on local law 8, but we have not called for public hearings on these 2. Joe Agostinelli, Jaime Martinez, and I, along with Land Use Counsel Amanda Brosi, had a brief opportunity. We did discuss some of the issues relating to the administrative adjustments. The current proposal does afford the building inspector the opportunity to deny such an adjustment. One of the things we discussed yesterday is perhaps similar to what we've discussed with the special events policy, is that if the building inspector believes that there may be a ground for denial, that instead of denying it, it simply gets sent to the Zoning Board of Appeals, who would ultimately be allowed to make a determination if someone was not happy with the decision here. Also, if a matter is already before one of the land use boards, such as if it is a site plan review and requires variances, then it should simply go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. What we're looking at here is that on those, let's call it, which you often see this with a deck. Joe can comment on this as well, where somebody is within 2 feet of the side yard and they're within the 10%. We see that a lot. We see this happen a lot, particularly with homes that are being sold, where suddenly it's discovered, oh, they're not in compliance. So we have to do something about it. So, instead of having to go through the Zoning Board of Appeals and getting a variance and all that other stuff, the building inspector can simply give an administrative variance or administrative adjustment. It is common in many jurisdictions. A lot of what is in proposed local law 10 is actually taken from what you see in the city of Albany, which has a very robust program for this. But what we would basically be looking at is, if you know, at the end of the zoning code, we have a bulk table, which indicates for parking spaces, it indicates for side yard setbacks, front yard setbacks, that if someone comes to with a request and they are within 10% of the numbers that are on the bulk guidelines, that the building inspector can essentially say, if they meet certain guidelines, that's okay. You don't have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. It would shorten the process, not require a whole presentation before the Zoning Board of Appeals, unless for some reason the building inspector thought it was necessary. I know there had been some discussion about doing this. I don't have the precise numbers of how many of these applications come before the zoning board, but in my 2 years as land use counsel, we had a lot of people who were really close. Or sometimes what happens is that you give a variance and it turns out that when they actually look at the survey, whoops, they're actually a little closer than they thought they would be. So this way, instead of having to go back to the zoning board and redo the variance again, they can just get an administrative adjustment from the building inspector. So that's the thought behind this, as well as to give an extension of time for the further, make it a 1 year with regard to variances. I should point out that because this would be an amendment to the zoning code, it would require that before the board could actually act, it would have to go to the planning board. and under section 270-59. And the planning board would come back with a recommendation. And then it could go to the board and they can schedule the necessary public hearing. But this is one of the, if you want to call it, technical adjustments to the zoning code that has been spoken of, and would, as I said, allow more work, more to be done by the building inspector, but also give a greater amount of time to the variances, because as you folks know, as of right now, the variances are only good for 6 months. And we often have the circumstance where people have to come back to the zoning board because the planning board has not acted in to get it done. Also, the language of the extension will change now. The current language is that they have taken some action toward starting construction. It will now be tied into either approvals or a building permit, so that that's an actual action that has been taken rather than somewhat subjective in terms of what goes on. Most of the applications for variances are granted anyway, or extensions of variances are granted, but this way, by doing it with 12 months, it will then run, give the longer period of time, and probably, we would hope, cut down on the number of extension requests that come before the zoning board. Thank you.
I'm especially excited to hear that it might be helpful to people when they're selling their homes. I know that's a really, really stressful time for anyone. And there are always, you know, when you start looking at all of the paperwork that may or may not exist for a given property from decades ago, that any way to be able to streamline that process for people is really great. But Joe, this puts a lot more accountability and onus on you. You're okay with this? Do you want to give us any of your thoughts on this? You're obviously instrumental in helping bring it forward, I hope, or tell us your thoughts or your fears.
Well, I think part of the discussion that we had the other day, the idea that if it's a commercial property, more than likely they're always going to be in front of the planning board for a site plan adjustment or a new site plan approval. So if it's a commercial property, it's going to go to the zoning board of variances are required anyway. So this is more geared to probably the residential, like 1 and 2 family homes, where you know, somebody's doing a small addition, they're doing a deck, and when you think about 10% against the against what the bulk requirements are, you're only talking about if somebody's off by about a foot or 2. Whether it's a side yard or it's a rear yard, it's not a tremendous amount of difference. And I think what happens often is, you know, a person proposes a setback for something that they're building. They construct it, the contractor's off by a little bit, and then there's no wiggle room for, you know, for approving something that's, you know, a matter of, you know, being off by 4, 5, 6 inches. Right now, I have to send it back to the zoning board, so all it's doing is delaying the people for a minor mistake. So, and I know a lot of the zoning board members, when I would have to send them back, would, you know, kind of approve it immediately because it would seem like it was so small an amount of difference from what the variance was granted. So, you know, rather than having the burden go back onto the homeowner to have to get back on the zoning board, wait another 6 weeks before they get back on the board just to get an approval for something that they're off by a matter of, you know, half a foot or inches, was kind of burdensome for them. So I think that this would actually, you know, push the process along a lot easier. And I think it would be a lot easier for the homeowners, especially the ones, you know, that are, you know, trying, like I said, to sell their homes. They're legalizing something they built like a deck. They're off by a small margin. And this can probably expedite this a lot faster. But it's geared mostly to the residential properties. You know, I think when we had the conversation the other day was if something was going to be in front of the planning board for a site plan approval, then it would go through the regular process with the zoning board. That would alleviate a developer from saying, I have 5 or 6 variances, but they're minor, so you can approve them all. You know, you have to go to the zoning board because you have, say, 5 variances that you're requesting. Whereas in a residential property, they're usually only applying for maybe 1 or 2 variances at most.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have questions or comments?
I would like
I knew you
to
would,
say-
Bob.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Bob.
Well, I believe those 2 years we were together on the board, and he's not kidding when he says a lot of these things are minor, or simple mistakes, like Joe says. And I'm so in favor of this process because it'll lighten up the event, really take care of things that really matter, and not burden the homeowner or burden the builder, whoever it is. 3 or 4 times people come in. It's a little thing. I agree with Joe said.
Bob,
Yeah.
can I interrupt for a second? I don't know if it's my
It's not you. It's
internet
not
at home.
Eureka. It's not Eureka. Yeah.
I can't hear every other word that you're saying. And again, I feel like I'm missing some important information because of that. If maybe you could start or move closer to the computer if you're using a laptop. I don't know.
Just hold on. Sorry.
Thank you.
The headphones are going to work. On. Okay, am I on now?
Yes. Sound good.
You can hear me?
Yes.
I'm not hearing you guys. That's weird. All right. Well, my little box is lighting up, so I'm assuming that everybody could hear me. Okay, great. Rika, to go back, this is just a long overdue thing for us, and it'll lighten up the load on the zoning board. I sat through many of those little adjustments, which is just a waste of time. And if it's within reason, the 10%, and Joe can sign it off, there's 100% behind this. And I'll just leave it at that. I'll figure out why I can't hear nobody. What'd I do?
So
Let me mute myself before I say something I shouldn't.
Thanks, Bob. So, and actually, Joe, thank you, because you clarified what my concerns were, obviously, in regards to, you know, what this 10% looks like. And I want to thank Stuart for working on this and bringing this back to the floor. So I guess my only question, because I was reading the resolution, and I guess one of the concerns was that my recollection, if it's correct, and maybe Stuart or Joe can help me out with that one, we were talking about having at least 2 people look at these variances besides Joe, or besides the building inspector, I want to say. And we were thinking, I believe my recollection was having a discussion with the zoning board chairperson or chairwoman, just to, you know, have someone else confirm that. Is that something that is my recollection correct, Stuart, or anybody else in the board that remembers that, or not quite that?
I honestly don't recall that, Trustee Quezada. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. I don't remember that we would, you know, to get the chair in. We do have some circumstances, and Joe, correct me, there are some circumstances where, for example, the planning board chair does sign off on certain things where we do not bring it before the entire planning board. But with regard specifically to this, I don't recall that, but you know, I'll defer to others who may have better recollection than me.
Again,
Well, I can tell you this. What we do is for the Board of Architectural Review, there are some minor things that people do, such as, you know, add a door, change some windows. There is some provisions that allow me to just fill out a form, and I sign it, and it goes to the chairperson of the Board of Architectural Review. They get to look at the plan of what the proposal is and see that it's something minor. and then they sign it, and they don't end up, the applicant doesn't have to go to the Board of Architecture review. So what Manny's suggesting, where the chairperson of the zoning board also doing the same thing, where they would review it and also sign it as well, is pretty much what we do right now with the Board of Architecture review. And I believe when we did talk about this previously, I believe it was Rika who had actually also brought that up about maybe getting two people to sign off on it. So would it be just the responsibility of one individual? So I do remember we did speak about that. So that is a possibility to do that, because that's what we do currently with the BAR.
Okay, thank you, Joe. And again, I'm not saying that that's the way we should do it. I'm just asking if that's something that we should be looking into it again. And so I'm going to defer that question to the rest of the board and to Stuart. But I'm going to piggyback on this one. So if we were to, obviously, as the Stuart said, if this resolution goes through, it's going to be for 2021. So my assumption is this will not be an additional application, or would it be an additional application? If that's the case, what does that mean for an application fee? Because technically when you apply, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm applying for building permit right now, sure, I go there, I fill up a building permit application, a building permit general, and I attach the zoning board worksheet, and I put, if I comply with all the setbacks, everything is not applicable, sure. But if I need something, I put that in there. And typically for a variance, you go to the zoning board. But now that you're not going to the zoning board, if this goes through with a 10% in a 1 and 2 family, what does that mean? Do they have to fill up a different application? Or is it going to be part of the application of the building permit? And if it is, then great. If it's not, are we looking to charge them an additional fee for this type of work, or for this type of review, I want to say?
Well, the proposed local law does refer to a document called an administrative adjustment review form, which would get filed and would indicate the reason for the adjustment and the proposed adjustment. As to a fee, that's a matter, I guess, to be discussed, because as you know, Trustee Quezada, there is a fee, obviously, if you file for a zoning board for a ZBA review. So if someone needed this, there might have to be a fee. It could probably be a fee that's not as high potentially as the zoning application fee, but there's at least here talked about a separate administrative adjustment review form, which would allow the building inspector to review it, make a determination. If there needs to be a secondary sign off by the ZBA chair or designee, that could be on there as well. But that's the reference here to the form. I have not had any discussion with regard to whether what fee might be potentially charged for such a review.
Thank you, sir. And again, so I'm not advocating to have an additional fee, because I think this is such a small review, because it's going to be part of Joe's review anyway when he looks at a deck, an existing deck, sure, or they doing a small addition that need a 1 foot setback that is within encroachment of the side yards, things of that nature. You have to do the review anyway, and that part is going to be part of the zoning charge anyway. Right. So I'm not suggesting to have an additional fee for this, but I want to make sure that this the additional form is very clear for a homeowner, at least that they're trying to legalize a deck where sometimes you don't need an architect or an engineer or any professional to help you with the process. So I want to make sure that process is very clear if this goes through, or when this goes through for next year.
Understood.
Those will be my comments for, I guess, for later on, I guess.
I understood. Thank you.
So what typically, Joe, what are the fees for something within this realm of this 10% or whatever? Is there a set fee for that? That would go to the zone. I mean, for the zone, if we didn't do this and you're going to the zoning board, what would that fee be?
I believe the fee, I mean, Jaime can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe like an area variance fee may be like $350 somewhere, something like that.
Yeah, we just updated the variance fees. And so what we tend to do is you have an area variance, whether it's like one or multiple, you get charged a single area variance fee. So that's essentially, I want to say it's 350, but there was a different rate for commercial properties versus 3 families versus 1 and 2 families. There, and we just made that adjustment. I guess with the last update. To
Right, right. So Manny, if I'm understanding you right, if this is an administrative adjustment that is made, you're saying that they should not pay this fee?
Correct. Because again, just keep in mind that the review process of the drawings, and when we're only talking about a 1 or 2 family home, we're
Right.
not talking about commercial, forget about the commercial. I'm talking about
No, no.
just 2 families and down.
I'm
So
with
the
you.
review process of that is going to be on Joe anyway, because he has to review the drawings. He has to review the deck, or he has to review the addition, or he has to review whatever the case may be. So if he notices that there's a 10% requirement for this, for the administrative process of the variance, you know, it's nothing additional. Correct, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, please. It's nothing additional that he's going to be doing, but just by looking at the number and maybe doing a small calculation to make sure that those numbers are right.
Yeah,
And
that's
pretty
correct.
much it.
That's correct, because normally when I'm doing the review anyway, if they have to go to zoning board, I prepare a referral letter, you know, to get them to apply to the, before they apply for the variance anyway to the board, and submit to the planning department. So either way, I have to do that review anyway to determine what variances are required, so.
Right, but just for clarity, I'm not, arguing the fact, but clarity, I'm presuming that your review is a piece of the pie there in that fee, correct? I would think. Stuart, is that how's that set up? I mean, it's all, if you come for nothing, you pay nothing. So you're coming for a variance, and he has to review it. So I think that the time clock starts ticking as soon as Joe puts it in his hands, and that's where that 350 or whatever the fee is starts. And then from there it goes to the zoning board, yada, yada, yada. And then.
Well, the thing to keep in mind is that when it comes to the building department, the building inspector would issue a note why, this requires a variance, basically in essence, a referral letter. Then they go to the zone, then they have to go to the zoning board.
Okay.
That then gets filed with the planning department through Jaime, and it goes that way. So in other words, Joe sees it essentially before, and Joe, correct me, before there's an actual ZBA application, because it will come in, someone comes in and says, oh, I want to build X. It's looked at, and they say, oh, but your side yard setback is wrong, or you're too close. So you're going to need, you're going to get a denial form or denial letter from the building inspector, and it's going to say on there, because pursuant to this section of the code, you're going to need an area variance. They then will go and file their application for an area variance. So that's
all right. That clears it up for me then. Okay, that's all I was just wondering where the clock started ticking.
Got it.
Thank you.
Others with questions and comments about this proposed local law? It sounds it's going to have, this is not the final version. This is the first time we're discussing it in work session, and this work sessions are about. Anybody else have more to suggest or ask?
I'm good with what was presented, and thank you, Joe, as well. It's always impressive to me that you are so good at hearing what all of us say and remember who says what and when they say it and include it in your considerations. I appreciate that. We look at so many different things in such varied ways, so I appreciate that you remember some of the details that we come up with. This sounds like something very worthy.
All right, then Stuart, what would be the next steps?
There are a few revisions that just need to be made in it. I think I'll bring it back to the board probably in the new year. And then, as I said, it would have to be referred to the planning board for a recommendation or a report. And once it comes back from the planning board, then the Board of Trustees can schedule a public hearing and proceed with consideration of the local law.
Sounds good. I'll tune in. So that would probably be January 13th might be the next time that if you're able to get a revised version by early January. I don't know if you feel like there's a time sensitivity or particular season by which you'd like to have this done, but
no, but I think it's particularly important. I mean, one, obviously in terms of the 10%, but I think we'd like to start getting the variances extended to a year, just because it then keeps things consistent with what we already have with the site plans. So we'll be pushing this, in the early part of the new year.
yeah, it will really be valuable legislation. Okay, good. Good luck.
Thank you.
All right, what's next? I think it's a little bit of the Stuart Kahan show tonight, right?
Yes, it is. Next is Local Law 9 of 2020, which was actually at the request of the village manager. This deals with sidewalk cafes, and the change here is that instead of having the village manager be the one who does the approvals, we're going to give something else to the building inspector to do because he does not have enough to do. And that is to essentially put this with him because he's the one who goes out and essentially inspects the location. The important thing here is, and it will be a change, it does say that the permit will be issued by the building inspector. That is incorrect. The permit will continue to be issued by the clerk's office as part of their general process there, but the approval would come from the building inspector. The Board of Trustees involvement would come, if you recall, if someone is putting something out for a sidewalk cafe that is too close to, let's say, one of our tree wells or something that's village property, the Board of Trustees can basically, by resolution, overrule that and waive it. But this proposed local law would effectively allow the building inspector to say, well, otherwise everything looks okay. I'm going to just say it's all right, and the clerk can then do it. It's similar to what we now do with other permits, such as, for example, cabarets, where the cabaret is essentially gets an approval by the police and the building inspector, and then goes to the village manager. Here, instead of going to the village manager, it would just be the building inspector who gets this application anyway from the clerk, and would then, if the building inspector thinks it's okay, can sign off. And that just shortens the process. I should point out that sidewalk cafes are still subject to the local emergency order in the village. We have 3 local emergency orders currently in the village. One deals with sidewalk cafes, one deals with the Civilian Police Complaint Review Board, and the last deals with parking in front of the library. We now have 2 spots in front of the library, which are now 15-minute spaces because that's where the library does their pickup and drop-offs. So we basically revised that. So there are those 3 local laws that are in effect and will remain in effect. The local emergency orders will remain in effect as long as the state of emergency remains in effect. The only pain is that they have to be renewed essentially every week because that's what the law requires.
Yeah, so I noticed those short-term parking spots in front of the library because there's new signage up and everything. So we put up signage because that's the only way to make it clear for people. But those are probably going to go away when the executive order goes away, unless there's a request for it to become longer term.
Unless a determination is made to continue to keep those as 15-minute spaces, which can be done. But this was to sort of short circuit that whole process. So that's where they are done there, and we have it. But the proposed local law 9 deals specifically with sidewalk cafes, and as I said, the primary change is to basically put it with the to allow the building inspector to grant it.
Great. I just wanted to clarify for anybody who's listening. You said that the cabaret licenses get approved by the manager. That's actually still a village board approval.
My mistake.
We're not really talking about cabaret license, but you're
No,
you're sort of
you're
comparing
right.
processes. I just didn't want to.
Nope,
But nothing had changed since last I heard, right?
nope,
Okay.
nope. No.
But it is the same process of review by those other departments.
Correct. So that's what local law 9 would be, and would also, as I said, just change it with regard to who can approve the permit, not issue the permit, but approve it.
Great. Joe, so you just keep getting more and more work. I guess that means you're doing a great job, and we want to make you feel more and more important every day. You feeling the love?
I'm feeling the love. Keep bringing it on.
In this case, we're actually removing a somewhat unnecessary step because Joe was already doing the work, and it seemed just another process to to streamline the process. There really didn't seem to be a need for it to come to the manager's office and then go to Joe, since it's establishing a sidewalk cafe is something that Joe would have to go out and do anyway. So it's streamlining. The idea is to make things easier for people too. So in that regard, but Joe is definitely the man of the hour this evening. There's a lot going on that he is facilitating for the betterment of all of us.
In this particular case, basically we're doing the same thing we've been doing all along. We do the inspection. We get the application from the clerk. We do the inspection. Everything is approved. If everything's good, it's approved. We sign it. Goes back to the clerk. So, as Karen had mentioned, it just takes one step out to make it. But for the building department, it's the same procedure. So.
I'd like to ask a question, Joe, if you don't mind, and Karen, really. Related to this, but I'm okay with this. It just brings a different issue to mind. I totally understand. I'm actually having a hard time saying what I want to say because it's like upsetting me as I say it. I understand that small businesses are suffering and we need to do everything we can. But there seems to be an increased sort of lackadaisical approach about some things, the distance between tables and chairs and some of the outdoor cafe. And it's actually really cold out. In the town, which is out of our jurisdiction, tents are being used with walls and heaters inside. A, I think it's a fire hazard to begin with, but B, it defeats the entire purpose of circulating air. And tables seem to be getting more and more tables and closer together. So I get the streamlining, which is actually one of the things. About a month and a half ago, the board members were all asked by village manager and the village manager asked by the board to put down initiatives that we want to work on. Streamlining, by the way, the building department is actually one of those things that we discussed as being of import to us. Are you still the department when people have issues? Because this sort of lackadaisical, and it's the only word I can think of right now, that some people are going through. And I experienced it and see it myself. I'm not going to tell you somebody called me. I'm going to tell you that part of my losing weight concept is that I'm walking more in the village, and both Saturday and Sunday. It's not about people just not walking with masks on the sidewalk. I'm talking about merchants. And what are you going to do with that information? Where does that go? And does that prevent you from giving somebody a license or taking it away? Or how does the other part of this work so that there is an understanding of the seriousness of the pandemic and the responsibility people have?
With regard to businesses, if there's an issue and somebody calls, it is a building department's right now under their sort of jurisdiction to go and enforce whatever rules, whether it's making sure the tables are 6 feet apart or staff is wearing masks, things like that. If things happen after hours, on weekends and evenings, the police serve the same function. So most of it is just reminding and consistently reminding people to do that. Right now, I think we've taken down most, not all, but most of the outdoor dining areas. And we only have, I think the boathouse is using a tent, but I haven't been down there to see how they've had it set up. But all of the tents and everything, like if you know, the boathouse did have to go through a permitting process for tents of a certain size. There's only certain tents that you can put heaters in, so they have to meet that criteria of a flame retardant tent. So you can't just put a heater in any type of tent. That would go through the building department. Joe, am I missing anything?
No, that's pretty much it. Actually, the state fire code allows you to do up to, you'd have to get a permit if you have a tent that has sides on it that is 200 square feet or larger. And then there's some fire safety items that have to be placed within it because you have basically an enclosed space. So there's a little bit more regulations than just having a canopy above you, which they allow you to have a larger size. You can have up to 400 square feet. But yeah, as for with the restaurants that were doing this, we worked with them to make sure that they were keeping the 6-foot distancing between the tables, 6-foot distancing between the tables and pedestrians walkways. That's why we ended up having to give up some of the parking spaces to accommodate that during the spring and the summer. But you know, obviously some of them called now. The winter's here, so they're not going to be using the outdoor.
No, they're not. It'll start up again in March, I would assume, when it gets, I don't know how warm it's going to be so far, but it'll start up again. I just want to make sure that the public understands that you're the place to call, and even on the weekend, if it's the police, but they could wait till Monday and call you, right?
They can call, they can submit emails over the weekend. Even if they call the building department or the manager's office, they can leave a message.
Okay.
You know, but if there's something that requires an immediate assistance, or somebody wants somebody to come down there immediately, then when it's after sort of the work hours or on the weekend, then the police can be called, and they're there obviously 24/7.
Right. No, I appreciate that. I mean, I just wanted, if anybody's listening to this and it gets recorded, we've got to get those numbers down.
And actually what we've done is when we do get in these complaints, we'll go out the next day, or if it's over the weekend on Monday, and we give the business owner a copy of the executive order again, and reminding them of the fact that, you know, their staff has to wear a mask, they have to make sure that people are distancing. And if it does happen multiple times, then we'll forward that over to the county health department as well, to let them know that we're having issues with this particular merchant.
I appreciate that.
But if there's an incident, say a Saturday night, where there's a large gathering in a place where they're not supposed to be, and the police are out there, they just will have to break up the gathering there, and then they'll let us know that has occurred, and you know, we'll talk to the owner about that and let them know that it's been put on record. Obviously, the police came out. It's been put in their record, because they have to keep a record of all the call-outs they have. And if we have that happening multiple times, then we'll have a written record that we can give to the health department that they're not following the regulations.
Thanks, Joe.
I'd like to ask something about the sidewalk cafe permits, because I'm aware that, you know, someplace like Good Choice Kitchen said, you know, I'm not doing any seating outside anymore. Go ahead and take those away. And we have taken away barriers in other places, but we actually we changed our sidewalk cafe rules to allow for outdoor seating year round, because thanks to climate change, it is nice to sit outside in January sometimes. And some of the businesses that we had the barricades are there for, we've removed the barricades, but they still have their tables outside. And that's not surprising, because we're not really sure. I mean, most people, if they can sit outside on a nice day, they would rather be outside because of just the safety concern right now with the pandemic. And also, businesses don't know if there's going to be further restrictions at any point where they won't be able to have any indoor seating. And, you know, if you're having a hot cup of coffee on a day that's 50 degrees and it's sunny out, you don't want to sit out on one of those tables and chairs. And right now, you don't have the ability to be 6 feet away from a pedestrian.
So I think, Mayor, you pointed out a good thing, because we were asked to take those down, and you know, I think there was an assumption that meant that the chairs were going inside, and then the chairs for 2 of the restaurants, I think, went inside. So we'll have to, right now, we'll loop back because we may have to put the diversion back in front of First Village, if that's where, I think that's the only Main Street business that still has outdoor seating right now. So we may, that might just have been like a sort of oversight when we were talking to businesses.
Okay.
So I'll let Paul know, but I think that again, we were actually asked by the businesses to take the stuff down, but we didn't realize, like, anyway, it's confusing for everybody, and it is not clear how cold it's going to be on any given day or what people's tolerance is. So we can put the diversion back just around First Village.
Okay, so it wasn't like we said, we're done with this. We're not providing this accommodation anymore. It was, you were being responsive to some people, but others might have. So we'll have to do case by case basis on the barricade.
Yeah, I have to go back and look at the emails, but I think that you know, the implication, and maybe it was just miscommunication, was we don't really need this anymore because now it's cold. And then I think maybe, you know, either we have some warmer days or stuff, or, you know, it is hard to tell because on any given day you may or may not want to sit outside. So we can address that though. But I think that was just sort of a miscommunication due to the season change and the fact that there were 3 restaurants together there that don't necessarily all serve at the same time or the same way.
Right, right. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Are we ready for the next agenda item? Okay, so next up we have a discussion about our fees for the fee schedule for freshwater wetlands permits. And we haven't heard about wetlands in a couple of weeks, but we're back. And I'd like to turn this over to Corporation Counsel Kahan and our Director of Planning, Martinez.
Thank you, Karen. We wanted to bring this back because I think even though the local law goes into effect on January 1, that's local law 7, I believe that the question of the fees or the fee schedule was kept open and would still need to be determined so that we can actually have a fee schedule in place as of January 1. Jaime, why don't I turn it over to you if I might, because I think you may have more familiarity with what the fees schedule we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm gonna share my screen if that's okay, just so I can pull up the fee schedule. And I mean, there's not a huge amount to discuss. About a month ago on November 13th, I sent out a bunch of documents to the Board of Trustees. And within that was the draft application, which had the permit fees. So this is a fee schedule I think that the board has seen before, and certainly you've had it with you for a little while. This is from Keller Session, so this is their, this is basically their proposal. Next year, I think the intention is to go out for a new RFP, and then we'd be looking at potentially different fees at that time once we determine what they are. These fees are pretty much just, fees to the consultant. There is a initial project site review fee, and if it's determined that there are wetlands on the site and they need a permit, then there is an additional permit fee, and that initial $50 submission fee would be credited towards the permit fee. And this is basically what it is. I mean, because we haven't had the ability to put out an RFP for the review of our wetlands, we're kind of at this place right now. But I think that Stuart has mentioned in prior meetings that the expectation is sometime in the spring that we would go back out with an RFP to deal with our consultant engineer, and the wetland fees would certainly be a part of what we'd ask the wetlands engineers to bid on. Should I make this screen bigger? I see you leaning in there. All right.
I'm sorry, what did you say? I missed what you just said, Jaime.
I asked if she wanted me to zoom in on the screen so it was easier to see.
Sorry.
Can you see? Is that better?
Yes.
So that's really it. If there are any questions.
Just reading it. Give us a minute.
Yeah, Jaime, I got a question on the above ground or underground utilities. The thing that stands out there is utilities. Is this not in a right of way?
No, this would be. So I mean, you think about like you have a property owner who has I think pipes or whatever running to the sewer, and they need to dig up the ground. It's running through a buffer area. They would have to come out, and it might connect to a right-of-way issue, but the applicants would not be representing any work done in the right-of-way without the permission to work in that right-of-way.
Right.
So largely, I don't think we would see very many applications where that was happening.
Yeah, that's why it stuck out to me. That's all. That's why I asked the question. All right, thank you.
I know each of these words, but I don't know how it's being used. Just if you could educate me, because a lot of these meetings are just such a great point of learning new things. On the soil testing, what is a percolation test hole? I'm just curious.
So basically, you dig the soil out and the water sort of comes up. Think of like a percolating coffee maker where the filter up top and it shoots water out the bottom.
Got it. Thank you. Google did not explain that well. Okay.
So I'll just remind folks that we wanted these fees to be in place. We wanted time to be able to review them, so that's why they're going into effect on the first of the year. And so we're following through exactly as we said we would when we passed the legislation. But passing the legislation, there's a lot of steps to that. You have to announce it, then you have to have the public hearing, and then you have to listen. And changing a fee schedule is like that. Like you put a resolution on for the next legislative session and you update it. So all of these were actually based on what is anticipated to be a reasonable fee and consistent with the demand on staff to be able to, or consultants to be able to do the review and the determination for this. But if it turns out that like something's out of whack, the staff can come to the board and say, you know what, we're charging too much, we're charging too little, whatever, and in a week it can be updated. So this is a recommended number, and if the recommendation is different 6 months from now, because you when you know better, you do better, and you'll update it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so to be clear, this money is to pay for the consultant. There's $0 that are going to go for the building department in terms of a processing fee. The building department still has building permit applications, the planning board, still has the planning board stuff. So this would be money that would be used to pay the consultant, and the consultant has advised us, without bidding it out to anybody else who might say that it's cheaper to do this, that this is what it would cost to do it today. When we put it out to RFP, of course, we'll have a competitive process, and we may find that other people feel like they can do the same work at a lower price. It's more because of the expediency that it's this high right now. And I wouldn't say that it didn't, nothing sort of stuck out.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow. You did explain that, and I guess I wasn't following the sequence of events. Okay, well that's great. So then it's really easy to pass this.
Yeah.
This is like a no-brainer. Like, okay, we'll pass this, and if anything, it might get cheaper. Great.
Well, I think they're going to do their duty, right, Jaime? And you're going to sit there and say, there are a few places where this could change. Number one, the RFP. Number two, you let this happen for about a year. You take a step back and say, this is what people are saying. It's too much. It's too little. We think we could do better. We don't think we should have any fees. I think this is great. I mean, I think, and thanks, Victoria, for explaining, because the fees are not like, you know, the whole big legislation. Those can be changed. So I think this is good stuff.
All right, so then are we comfortable having this as a resolution next week so that it'll be in place for the first of the year as is, and then it'll be updated as appropriate?
Mayor, before we go from there, I just had a couple few questions in here. Thank you, Jaime, on this. So I have two quick questions. Obviously, in the last one I have, and the septic repairs and the soil testings. Actually, I done percolations test myself, which is pretty fun to see. Usually do that on when you're doing a dry well system, you know, some sort of septic work. It's very interesting to do that. So when we put in this administration fees, are the consultants charging this for themselves to do the tests, or for them to review what it was presented by either the architect or the engineer that obviously at this point it will be the client or the owner who hired these people
To review it.
so they're reviewing the work that, because percolation tests are pretty simple. It's either you have good soil or you have bad soil. You know, so they're charging $250 to review the report that another engineer or another architect just told them that they need a better soil. I'm just trying to understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're getting into some pretty good questions here. In my experience, you can do percolation tests where you have 20 holes, and you can have percolation tests where you have one.
Yeah.
And so they're reviewing what's being presented. They may have to go do a site visit as well, just to check the work that's being done as it's being done. I think that their numbers are essentially based off of sort of a general cost. And sometimes they're, going to be doing 3 hours of work, and sometimes they're going to be 5 hours of work, and sometimes it's going to be 30 minutes of work. But unfortunately, you can't set fees based off of the hourly rate, I think. And that was their expectation. So they wanted to present something like this. We could go back later down the road, I think, and look for something different. But no, they're not doing the percolation tests.
Okay, that's what I was I mean, if that's the case, yeah, if that's the case, I want to make sure that the homeowner is aware, or even like the consultant is aware that they don't have to do that. The consultant will be doing that. So the other part of this equation is and I'm going to take responsibility for this, because on November 13, you sent an email out to me and to all the fellows on the board in regards to including this fee schedule, but we were talking about the application as well. So I was hoping to see the application to be part of this presentation as well, because we definitely going to need the fee, but we definitely need the application. If you scroll down, I believe the application is part of the presentation that you have in there.
It is.
Yep. Can you bring it down? Because I'm looking at it on my screen right now as well. Yeah. So I have two questions in here. Thank you. Well, not two questions. I have one question. Thank you for doing this. I'm sorry I didn't get back to you. I saw it. I put it in my notes. There wasn't really any additional questions that I have in this application, but one, I want to make sure, because this process starts with the building department. Sure. Is Joe still here? I don't see Joe. Is he still?
He is still here.
He's still here. So if Joe, thank you. So did you get a chance to review this application? And if you did, are you okay with this? All the stuff in here? Me personally, I'm okay with all this stuff. I don't see that much of a problem. I only have one. So I guess one question is on the instructions. Submit 2 hard copies and a digital copy. We're trying to save paper. And I thought we were doing everything digital, so I'm not sure if the 2 hard copies are necessary, I guess. So that's sort of my questions, I guess, if anything.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is any of the properties that have potentially wetlands on the property, we're going to flag that in municity. So when an application comes in and anyone in the staff sees the notation on there that's of potential wetlands, we will now tell the applicant that they pay a $50 fee, which would go to the consultant so that they can make that determination. But what we're going to do is send, since we do get it digital, we're going to email that set of plans with all the other information that they need, any other documentation, directly to the consultant. We'll email it to them as an attachment.
So what do we need, the 2 hard copies again?
We don't. I mean, I think that we can certainly, we need a copy probably for our records. I think the 2 copies probably would be just for record keeping purposes.
Everything is digital. I'm not sure if we need those hard copies unless you guys tell me otherwise, but I thought we were trying to do, even your current applications, Joe, right now, everything's submitted online, correct?
Yeah, we do. We take everything in online. I mean, it's possible, I mean, maybe the consultant may want something on a hard copy for them to read, which if we have to get them a copy, we can do that. But we do take the submissions of everything digital right now.
Yeah, we do, for the planning department, we do take hard copies of the originals just for the file. We don't use them for much of anything other than to stick them in the file. So we do, so that's really, I put together the application. I think that was just, I thought that was the right way to do it. But we could certainly change that.
You still have hard copy files? Is that necessary?
Yeah.
Is that just how it's always going to be, you think?
I believe Jamie keeps them, yeah. Jamie has a hard copy file for the planning board. We don't have anywhere near the volume that the building department has. So it's not the same. You know, we're talking about 20, 30 applications in a year. It's not quite like where the building department has to keep the stuff. And we only have to keep the records for, I think, 7 years. So, but we apparently do. I'll be honest, I've never seen any hard paper myself. I'm pretty much all paperless, but we do ask for it and Jamie keeps it.
So I guess in this case, my preference will be everything digital because they're submitting that already, and our consultants should be getting used to receive PDFs so they can review and they can mark them up and they can send those back. They don't have to mail anything. They don't have to come and drop them off. There's no time wasted. You know, technology in that sense is pretty good.
All right, I'll make that change, and I'll redistribute. I'll recirculate it to the board.
Great. Any other questions? Right. So modest change to the application, and we'll have the fee schedule on the agenda for next week. Right? Am I missing anything? Okay, great. Next up, Madam Manager.
I don't know if you guys are paying attention, but we're going in reverse order for our local laws. So next local law, number 8, 2020, some additional changes to our special events law that we had spoken about earlier this year. Again, Corporation Counsel, Stuart Kahan, and this time Bill Garrison from our Recreation Superintendent will be joining him for this discussion.
Thank you, Karen. It's sort of like the Benjamin Button movie. So as we go backwards, but Brad Pitt will not be showing up during tonight's meeting.
Okay, if he's not showing up, you can't use that as the analogy.
Well, what can I tell you? When we had our public hearing last week, I had mentioned there were a few issues that Jamie Hoffman, Bill Garrison, and I had talked about, which we thought it needed some input from the board based upon some of the comments that had been received. So before there was any further redrafting, I just want to discuss some of those issues with the board. The first dealt with a question that had been raised by the folks at Green Ossining, Susie Ross in particular, with regard to their concern that if they had to meet the village's requirements, particularly with regard to insurance and fees and things like that. An entity such as Green Ossining could not do that because it's basically just a group of people, to be perfectly honest. It's not even an unincorporated association. And I did mention to the folks on the board in a note I had sent around Thanksgiving, I guess, that there are a couple of municipalities which do carve out exceptions for not-for-profits, which would not include Green Ossining because it does not qualify as a not-for-profit. Or in other places, they define what you might call as let's call it a civic organization. And that in such cases, that organization might be otherwise exempted from certain fees. And I believe it's the city of Newburgh. They basically go by who can afford it. So they have a definition of indigency for both individuals and corporations. Essentially, if the corporation does not have assets above, let's say, $5,000, their fees can be waived. I'd rather not have to start using an indigency basis here, but there is a question as to whether the board wants to look at, carving out an exception. My understanding, though, is that, for example, the Earth Day event for Green Ossining is in fact held at Lewis Angle Park, which is in fact, a town park, not a village park. But it was a concern that Ms. Ross had raised. Another question was on the issue of notice. As you may recall, one of the concerns that was raised by Father Elvin was who is to be notified with regard to events. And I had suggested to the board that we may want to take these movable events, such as parades, processions, runs, bicycle races, and essentially just require notice where the event begins and potentially where the event ends if they're two different locations, not the entire course of the event, because otherwise it could get fairly expensive since we are requiring notice within a 100-foot radius of the location. If the event is held just, by the way, at St. Anne's, that would include 40 homes or 40 notices that they would have to send out. And the last thing I wanted to discuss dealt with the issue of block parties. We did have some discussion about that last week. I'm beginning to think that the block parties probably do not have to go to the Special Events Advisory Committee because it's probably just an added layer for folks who are simply having a block party. But those are really the three topics that I wanted to have some discussion on. There were a few other issues that Jermaine Smith had raised. One dealt with the issue of expressive activity. As you will recall, the way that the proposed law is written now, if the event, that to notify the village manager within 48 hours of the event, that is considered expressive activity, and then they would not have to comply with the ordinances in terms of fees and things like that. Mr. Smith was concerned that 48 hours may be too lengthy, and the code could certainly be changed, or the proposal could be changed, that the 48-hour advance notice could be waived if the intended use or event is of a time-sensitive nature, or if it is in response to a contemporaneous occurrence. That way, some things that happen immediately don't in a sense get held up that way by the 48 hours. But as I said, the main policy decision dealt with the issue of whether or not the board wants to carve out an exception for either, be it not-for-profits or civic organizations. The concern obviously has to be that you don't want the exception to swallow the rule, which is really where that comes in. We do have a provision in the proposed local law, and I thank our new insurance broker for this, which would effectively allow the insurance provisions to be reviewed on a case-by-case basis, so that if for some reason someone was unable to procure insurance, that would be something that could be, decided and determined, how necessary it would be. But those are the three main areas, as I said, dealing with the notice, dealing with the civic organizations or not-for-profits and the block parties as to whether or not it needs to go to the SCAC. And I just was looking for some guidance from the board before it's redone. And Jamie and Bill, if you have any comments or if there's anything that I have forgotten, please chime in. I would appreciate it.
I have a comment. Bill, were you going to say something?
Yeah, just the one issue regarding a private event in a park. If that would be permitted or not? We were under the impression that we were going to be only permitting events that would be open to the public,
right.
But if it was a private event such as a wedding, would that be permitted?
So just one comment about the fee structure, because this is something I'm very intimately acquainted with the sequence of conversations that we've had over the past year and a half on this. That was something we discussed at length, and this was one of the issues that created sort of the inconsistency of what was what was a worthy cause, what was not a worthy cause, what was, what should be. And basically what was happening is everybody felt that they were doing things that brought value to the community and wanted fees waived. This was a chronic sort of issue. And it did contribute to difficulty in carving out that tier. And we couldn't really see a clear way forward. I will say, as somebody who ran a nonprofit and worked at two nonprofits in Ossining, nonprofits come in all different shapes and sizes. Most can afford the fees that we're talking about for the events that we're talking about. Events fees are part of their event structure if they're doing, so I don't think that it's an enormous issue for most of the nonprofits. I think that some of the structures, if you're looking at a green, Ossining isn't really a nonprofit. It is a committee of the village and town, which puts it in a different category. And we did talk about when an event is really for greater public benefit for our large scale events where we're talking about, whether it's the fireworks or things like that, where we're not charging fees per se. So I just want to caveat that was something we had discussed at length early on, and we at that point had determined that the fees are the fees for regardless of nonprofit or not. Most events are done by nonprofit entities or civic organizations. So the private organizations would probably be the exception. So I just wanted to give that bit of historical information.
Thank you for that, Karen. And I concur with everything that you said. The whole point of doing this was to create continuity and fairness. And we have had multiple discussions about nonprofit, for-profit. And I'm going to say what Rika has said many times: a nonprofit can hold an event, but then they're going to have a bunch of for-profit businesses as vendors. So I mean, it's and like Karen, you said, everybody thinks they're doing something good for the community or helping with the local economy or supporting local businesses or whatever it is. Everybody's got a good reason why they're doing their event, and it's not our position to be able to judge who has to pay fees or not, other than to say that these are the fees and they're reasonable fees. And let's remember, the fees are to offset the taxpayer burden, and we spend tens of thousands of dollars a year facilitating all of these events for our community. And we do that because we are a community. And when something happens, we want things to be safe. And we want people to someday, again, be able to gather and celebrate cultural gatherings or celebrate the community in whatever way, whether it's for environmental reasons or to support great local businesses that we love or to support other organizations that are doing great work and we want to help them raise funds. Absolutely. But it's unreasonable to continue as we have been and to create a fair playing field for everyone. I'm loath to create any of these. I'm glad, Stuart, you are not recommending an indigency chart, because I think anybody can come up with a list of checks and balances that would show that they are indigent and therefore should not have to pay fees. The last thing I want to do is put something in place that is gonna put the village staff in a position of again, just perpetuating unfairness and incontinuity. And then we've wasted all of this time. The only, I did want to and I would say Earth Day is one of those things that, like, if there's a list of things we want to talk about of what are going to be municipal events, because Susie had talked about potentially in 2020 expanding to Henry Gordine. I've been encouraging her to for years and figuring out how to really make use of the full waterfront, and it was going to be a combined giant event. Of course, nothing happened. But if like maybe Earth Day is on that list along with parades, and maybe if we decide as a municipal government that we're going to play a special role in that, even if much of the legwork is done by community members, that is something that should be discussed publicly and decided by the Board of Trustees, and not just put into the hands of the SEAC, the Special Events Committee there, because it's a bigger deal than it's very, very tricky, and I'm not going to be here, so good luck. I'll throw stones at you when I think you're doing a terrible job of being hypocritical. Then the only other question that Stuart raised, and I think I was the one who raised in one of the emails, with 3 Westerly, when that business opened, and I don't know if there was a legal document in it, but I do recall there was conversation about them being able to use the park for weddings. I don't know if that's some formal agreement that we have with them. We know it has happened in the past, so they've never paid a fee for it. They have put tents up and damaged the irrigation system in the process. And I don't think we've had any sort of consistency in charging them anything. I'm not saying that we can't have private events in the park, or that we can't have private events just in Henry Gordine Park. All of that, I'm not saying you should prohibit, but again, it'll be a public burden that should be offset. So that's my thoughts. Who else has thoughts and questions?
Is Omar still on the call, by the way? Omar, are you on? He was
Yes,
using
I'm
the
still
phone.
here.
Oh, okay. No, I just didn't know. It's just been quiet. I just didn't know if you were still with us. Thank you. I think you asked some questions. So one, or want to comment. So one is the 48-hour piece. I totally understand what Jermaine Smith is saying, but the reality of it is that 48 hours should cover 90-something% of any situation. And I think that we make rules and policies not for the 1% exception, but for the 99% that of true occurrences. And based on that, I think, as was said earlier, that by email, which I think is the fastest way, even if something came up past, I don't even know if they're called work hours anymore, because I think some of our department heads will work well beyond the standard work hours. But an email could just be sent to the village manager, because it sounded to me like the village manager still has some room, some wiggle room if something comes up that is seen as unless I'm wrong, and Karen, you can correct me, but I think Stuart had said, these are the 3 issues I have. That was one of them. That's my point of view, unless somebody says, no, we could never make an exception, which doesn't sound realistic to me. So that's my opinion, that 48 hours is reasonable based on that. The block party is always tricky. We've had scenarios where people call them block parties, not so much block parties, more like little businesses happening at the end of a street and whatever. I think block parties are just complicated. I'm trying to think how to keep it simple, and I don't know what you're actually recommending, Stuart, on that, because it wasn't clear exactly what.
I can say one thing.
Yeah.
What you see in many municipalities is, even in villages, but they take it from the town law, which is that a block party may not include yard sales, rummage sales,
Right.
any type of business at all, or any type of essentially fundraising event. It is essentially just a block party. And you can actually, we don't have that in the definition here, but that can actually be put in so that folks don't think, well, we can each basically take all our, stuff out of our homes and we can sell it and we can have, that's different. because we do have provisions for yard sales
Right, exactly.
in our code. So that can actually be put in there to sort of tighten what makes up a block party as compared to, a more broader definition.
But was that your question? I just don't know if I understood.
But what I
because-
was saying is currently the way it's worded in the local law or the proposed is that all block party applications would ultimately go to the Special Events Advisory Committee. I wasn't certain if that was needed for block parties because it's not the same kind of event. So that's really, I did not want to have someone who just wanted, neighbors who want to have a block party
Right.
to just have to send them to this other organization.
Okay. Now I get it. So I'm in agreement. Let's keep this simple. I like everything else. If we miss the mark, and there are a lot of events that happen that shouldn't be happening, we sit back again in a few months and say, look, these block parties aren't exactly what they thought that we were going to be. My guess is most people get together and say, let's celebrate something. And that, again, the 80-20 rule that I agree with you, Stuart. I think let's keep it simple. I wanted to say, Karen and Stuart, that a lot of what I read about other towns and cities that are going on from Long Island to Massachusetts, and I've said this before, I have a friend on the Cape who is also a council person. I sometimes compare notes. A lot of what they're doing is getting rid of events. The discussions are not like, how are we going to be equitable? How do we give new organizations access, not just the same old that just sort of have their dates? I have to give some real expression of gratitude here that you guys are really focused on consistency, equity, everything Victoria said a few minutes ago, but I want to say it and echo her words because we knew taking this on was going to be a bear, and it is. We keep having to make a couple of changes. The changes, though, that you're all bringing up are changes from public conversation and engagement, and that's really the way, that's good government. I mean, I know lots of villages. The reason our 4th of July, it's usually not even on 4th of July, but the 4th of July fireworks has gotten bigger and bigger is because many of the communities around us have eliminated them. They're not thinking about how do we make them better. They're thinking about saving money and getting rid of them because they're so expensive and require so much work. So kudos to this group. For thinking more in line with streamlining, equity, access, keeping track of things, and feeling comfortable with that this is, and I know Jamie did a lot of work on this and doing some research with Stuart. So I'm thrilled that we are sort of taking nothing off the checklist. I think we're there. I mean, I know, Stuart, you've got a couple of things based on commentary, but I think we're there. So I'm grateful that you guys have gotten this very complicated piece, and there are going to be complaints. When do you roll it out? When do you start? I just think that it's frankly long overdue. So I'm in support of this, and I'm trying to. I was just looking at something I wrote on the side while you were talking, Stuart, to make sure I answered the questions for the input that you asked, but I think that we did actually get that. So thanks.
I just want to follow up on something that I forgot to mention.
Victoria, I'm sorry, I'm going to speak after you, but if you could put me back on later. The thing about the processions, Stuart also asked about the whole letter. Right. Yeah, that I don't think we've come back to, but I'll wait till you're done.
Well, no, you and I both had a lag time in that similar question, because in related question, you asked us about notification, which comes up. Father Elvin mentioned that it would be quite onerous to have him send letters to every person in a proximity to the entire pathway of a procession, which is a very reasonable concern for him to have raised. It would essentially make it impossible for there to be a procession. I don't think that's really what we're trying to do. We're just trying to have it so that people could be aware of it and anticipate it and plan accordingly. But Are there any, and maybe, I don't know if Jamie or Bill have any insights, because you guys did so much research at looking at other communities. Are there any alternatives for public notice other than letters to people's homes? I mean, obviously when there's a fair, everybody knows because they're invited, come to the fair. But as far as, publicly noticing, like, next Saturday at 12 noon, there will be a procession going, and here's the route. I mean, is there anything that we could include in our policy or applications?
The only other thing that I saw, other than really just passing out letters, was to do it through the Nixle system or whatever system they were using that's similar to that. But that would be on the community to do that, not the event producer or the procession holder. It would be on Ossining to do that.
Right. Well, that would be the police, but that wouldn't necessarily be done. I mean, and the police actually do for the really big ones sometimes, although they could do it more because there are things that come up and we're often caught by surprise. But I think the point of the letters is to do it in advance. So, for example, for businesses, there's businesses on Main Street who have said to me, I really count on Saturdays for my customers, and 2 Saturdays in June. Every year I lose my nut for the week because you've got these events that are shutting down my street and making it impossible for my customers to be able to get to me. If they get a Nixle that morning and says your street's shut down, that doesn't do give them any opportunity to say, hey, think about me. Maybe you don't shut down Main Street as early or whatever it is. So the point of the notification is not just make sure your car's out of the driveway if you need to leave to go to work by a certain time, but it's also to give people advance warning so that they can express their concerns in advance.
That does make sense. Something we had to talk about when we were at the special events meeting where we were meeting with the community was to push something out like a calendar that would have the events on it. Something different from the web blast that it's something that if we know that something is, when we're aware that there's an event that's largely coming up that's gigantic, we can always go to the businesses and hand that out individually to those. But it's the people that are coming in from the outside that we would have a difficult time reaching unless they're subscribed to one of our blasts.
One of the things that we talked about and back in the day when we were actually planning events and talking to people while we were formulating the event policy, we had talked to a lot of different people who, some, whether it's the Portuguese Fair, the Village Fair, different things that go on throughout Ossining, ways that we could get more activity off of Main Street, on Main Street, in parks, out of parks. What we did, getting people together and having these conversations is we started putting the implications, the pros and cons of every type of thing. And what we found, by and large, people were really receptive to the idea that, we never thought of the fact that when we do this and it's, it may impact other businesses or there was definitely a willingness of almost everybody, regardless of where they were coming from. The businesses didn't necessarily want to shut down the events, and the event holders certainly didn't want to impact the businesses negatively. So the idea of having the calendar, at least for the business community, I think would be, and we can figure out ways that we can have that, promote those things and to get out the word that these things are happening to as many people as possible. And I don't think that's an undue burden on the village to be able to just maintain that and figure out a way to publicize it better. And that would work for the processions too. But I'm hoping that, I anticipate that when we're in the clear to do large scale events where there's no more social distancing, that we are going to have a deluge of people who want to do events. And our biggest challenge will be trying to schedule them. But my hope is that we can really come together and work collaboratively too, so that we can really start taking some of these considerations into, really taking them to heart. Because if, a lot of the drive for the events, not all of them, but it's about we're for economic development. And if it's going to take away all the parking or shut down the businesses that day, then it's kind of not really quite maybe economic development for everybody. So we have to really, I think this is another thing that we're going to have to get ahead of the curve to work out some of these things in terms of scheduling, in terms of making sure that we really are doing value-added events that work with the business community and the event holders and the community at large that wants to attend them. So the meeting that we had probably was one of our most successful community engagement meetings that we had while we could still meet in public. I mean, I think we had close to 60 people at that meeting, and it was a fairly robust dialogue, and we were keeping all those people on a list and communicating them with them, and they've been giving feedback on this document. So I think as we go forward, we can also use that group that we now have to run some ideas by them in terms of publicizing. And I think for the processions, the same way we sort of publicize when we're going to be doing the fireman's parade and things like that, that tend to take up, time and street, we'll just figure out a way to do that for the processions as well.
Yeah, it might be helpful because this is like two different levels of communication we're talking about. One is
Yes.
well in advance, and well, it's maybe three because it's well in advance to business owners, some advance notice to community members, and just folks who need to be able to get out of their driveway kind of thing. Nixle is used by the police, and the police manage it, but it could. So, I mean, other communities use it differently, I would think, or some version of texting that is an immediate way to reach out to people. So it would be worth, I mean, when we, like years ago, like 6 years ago, when we talked about having like a call system along with like, it was going to be this robust thing that village management would be able to use for communication as well. And we really should take advantage of every tool that we have to communicate with people. You can over communicate. I really know a lot about the streets opening and closing in Yorktown that I never thought I would know. They use their Nixle very liberally. I think there's probably something between that and what we're doing now, and expanding esse use to more events related things that aren't quite so much law enforcement, that's not really on their radar as much, could be a worthwhile tool to share. And then the last thing I'll just say, Stuart, I just want to clarify when you said about block parties. It sounds like one of the provisions that you've seen elsewhere that could clarify what makes something a block party, so that it doesn't have to go through all this extra scrutiny. It's just nothing. You're not allowed to sell anything.
That would be correct. Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
So it's not junk from your basement, not alcohol, not food, not balloons, not nothing.
Right. Okay. And so on the notice, I think what everyone said makes sense. I did, as I said, I think for the sponsor, if they can just notify the people, and they have to do it within 20 days after they get notification from Bill that the date is okay. But perhaps something like, what do they do in the city? They put signs up on light posts that say, there's going to be something like that, street, and just they put the date on it and they just take that down. But this way, all Father Elvin has to worry about is his own location, and that he's in a congested area, that there are 40 homes within 100 feet. We can work on that, but I think that,
those processions though are done he knows the dates in advance and he knows the routes in advance, right, doesn't he?
I believe that.
So
yes.
So he can give you all those dates, like 6 months worth of dates.
Sure.
And it could be like a mass mailing that says these are the next 6 days. Does he do different routes, or is it usually the same
there's
route?
all different routes.
Yeah, they actually.
And there's a reason for why they're all different routes. Is there a religious reason?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
In
so
the
it's a
past,
religious reason. It's not
I think it's
just like,
organizational. There's different organizations that lead different marches.
and they also obviously now with this law, it would be a little bit different, but they usually, this is normally in a January work session, the procession dates, at least since I've been here. It's been a part of it where Father Elwin has submitted them, and then the board reviews them, and the board says which ones they can have, and so on and so forth. So I don't know how that's going to change for January, but something to think about.
well, for probably 2-3 months, you couldn't do them. It's a whole different question. So we just have to figure out a way to do like a mass mailing to those routes. I wasn't aware that there was a religious reason for different routes and why they don't just, I mean, I understand some are larger than others, why they can't use the same route. But maybe that's even worse for the people that, live on those routes and have those. So, all right,
Yeah.
this is, we'll work through this. We're not going to solve it tonight. This is a concern.
Well, I think we are trying to solve it tonight, right? So that we can close the public hearing someday.
Well, yeah.
I know, Stuart, how close are we? How close are we, Stuart?
I mean, based upon what you folks have told me tonight, I mean, there aren't a lot of revisions to make, and we can continue it. We can do that. The alternative, folks, is that we put this on for we continue the public hearing in January, and we have another discussion at our first work session in January. If we have some open issues, we can do that. All we have to do is basically indicate on the next agenda that this public hearing has actually been put over till whatever date that the board chooses. And we'll just change the numbering of the local law because it won't be 8 anymore. It'll be probably 1 of 2021, but that can easily be done. So I don't want to race it if we don't have to, but we can either continue the public hearing next week and I can make those corrections, or we can have another discussion on issues of notice and things like that before we go back to the public hearing. Whatever is your pleasure is fine with me.
Can I just ask one question, I guess? And I agree with everything that Victoria and Rika has said so far in regards to what this proposed law should be. But let me ask you something, Stuart. If we were to have a signage ordinance or law right now, just like the one that we're talking about to do public notices for the building department or the planning department, when they go in front of any of the boards, will that satisfy the notifications on something like this here as well, or not quite?
It's not really the same, because the signage requirement for the land use that we discussed last year dealt with the specific location. It might work, Trustee Quezada, if you're dealing with the specific location, saying that there is going to be, but most events, if an event is over, if it's like the village fair, for example, or something like that, it's over, over some space, you're not necessarily, pulling, everybody in. And I should point out that even under the those proposed local laws dealing with notification, signage notification, there was still mail notification required. You still have to do that. So I think here the best is to have some notification. Listen, we can change it from 100 feet to 50 feet, which would then bring in, fewer people would have to get notified and just, lessen the cost. But I do think it's important that, the business owners, certainly, the business owners and those who are in the area be made aware that there's an event that's going to be coming up on a particular date. And since this would have to be done 20 days after Bill gives basically says that the date is okay, that's fairly early in the process. So people will know fairly early on, there's going to be an event on this date going on, in or about this location.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Stuart.
Sure.
So Stuart, it sounds like we're really close. Maybe as we get ready for next week, will you have, we've had the public hearing open based on what was originally, it's been over a month, and we've, it's been almost 2 months now that we've been doing public hearings on this, and we've modified it quite a bit since then. Is the latest version on the website a modified version? Have you been modifying it all along?
No,
and that
the latest, which on the website is everything other than what we've discussed tonight.
Okay.
So what we've discussed tonight are not major, it's not a gutting of what we've done. So
right.
The fact is that those changes could be made. They could be up on the website, hopefully by, Friday, and then it would be there, and then it would be part of the public hearing on, the continued public hearing on Wednesday night. I mean, that's certainly, it's definitely doable. It's really, whatever, as I said, the pleasure of the board, but it can be done because there, as I think Trustee Levin said, we're basically there. It's just there are a few things to just deal with.
So the thing that also needs to be updated, though, we talked about not finalizing the law until we had the fees and the protocols in place.
That's true.
And the protocols, all of the application and all that I know needs to be updated, and that's actually a pretty substantial document, and it's easy to modify, but we want to know, like, for example, we want to know if you're an event organizer, whether it's, Susie Ross, she could look at the proposed law, she could look at the proposed fees, and she could look at the proposed protocols and understand this is how it would actually affect me. And that's the kind of feedback that we want. And right now, I know there's updates that have verbally been communicated to me from the protocols that aren't in the updated version of the protocols. And I don't know where you are, and I don't know if that's a Stuart thing or a Jamie thing or a Bill thing.
It's a Jamie thing.
Hey, Jamie.
I'm working.
So then why don't you tell us what your timeline is for updating the protocols and such?
I think that once I get the update from Stuart, then I'll begin working on that probably on Tuesday of next week, because I'm not in on Monday. So I would say by Friday of next week.
Okay,
Yeah,
so that's after,
Victoria, you're suggesting to open to keep the public hearing open so that people can react to whatever Jamie will be putting forth, because they should have that opportunity, right? Right. I'm looking, you're going, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I think
that's very fair.
It's a very, it's going to have such a direct impact on really a handful of people that are the event organizers, but a number of them have spoken with us all year long about this.
This is sort of a big deal, as I said earlier. Like, it may not seem like that to people, but this is big in the sense of local government and getting it. We don't always get everything right, and there's room for changing things, but this has been a highly engaged piece of our community. So by the way, Stuart, I do like your 50 feet reduction from 100. That may be another solution. I don't know. So simple. I'm sort of surprised it took us this long to even come up with it, but yeah, I'm in support of keeping it open.
So are we going to just basically adjourn it? In other words, to go into January and not have the public hearing on Wednesday, so that we can have basically a whole document, both local law and everything.
Didn't we call for the public hearing? We adjourned it to next Wednesday.
You adjourned to next Wednesday, but since you're not adjourning it sine die, you can just adjourn it to another date. If you did it the other way, you actually have to renotice it in the newspaper and do everything like that.
Well, I mean, if we're going to keep it open until the January whatever meeting anyway, right? I just feel like we publicly noticed it. If people want to show up next week and talk, it's going to be hardly any people. We might as well hold the public hearing, make a motion to keep it open until January, whatever, right?
It's fine, but to the extent that I can have something for you folks, I will have it so that at least if it's out there, people can look at it.
Great.
That's good.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks all. Go team.
Okay. Next up, we have our treasurer, Dale Brennan. She'd like the board to consider a resolution allowing the village to re-levy delinquent water and sewer payments onto the village tax bill. So, yeah.
Thank you, Village Manager Dettori. Good evening, Mayor and board. Sorry about the lateness of the memo that went out with the final list, but it's even not final at that point. We still try to give people time to pay these open balances. The due date for payment was December 4th, but if people are calling and requesting if they can still pay to avoid an open balance going to the village taxes, as long as they come either with cash or a certified check, we will take payment through Friday. We also, when we sent the re-levy notice in the beginning of November, we also included the statutory notice for the moratorium for COVID, which allows residents an additional 180 days after the state of emergency ends, which, thank you, Stuart, is now July 8th, for them to be able to pay in installments without penalties or fees for people that send in the self-certification. So far to date, we have had 11 certifications sent in, 4 of which are properties that have been excluded from the current list. In reviewing the list, we are actually a little bit under for transfer to taxes than we were last year, which is definitely good. Of the current list, there's 291 properties. Compared to last year, there were 306. I was trying to compare, if these were reoccurring properties versus new ones coming on that might, have some fiscal stress. And in doing that comparison, there were actually 53 properties in total that had never been on the re-levy list before. And of those 53 properties, 20 of those are actual commercial or commercially owned properties. So just a little analysis to go along with it. So there will be a board resolution that we would like to bring forth for the 12/16 legislative meeting. And we'd also like to add a resolution for transferring any open ETPA invoices as well as property cleanup bills, even though the ability to transfer these open items is already touched on with previous resolutions or local laws. This would just finalize us transferring those as well to the village taxes. So I thank you for your consideration.
Yeah, the sanitation fees, that's new, right? We haven't always had that now we could put on as a lien against their taxes.
The
We
property,
used to handle it that way.
the property cleanup,
Yeah,
yes.
I mean,
Although-
relatively new, but
Yeah, we, over the years, I've seen 1 or 2, but definitely, this year, with the change, there's a few open on that, as well as the ETPA fees charges are new as well. So for the ETPA, out of the 13 properties, there will be 8 that will be transferred to the first half of the village taxes.
okay. And thank you for doing the analysis that you discovered that there are 53 properties that have not been on the water re-levy list in the past couple of years, and that 20 of these are commercial or commercially owned. Can you help me understand what that is telling you?
I think for me, it was to see how much maybe the commercial side is being affected, potentially by COVID and not having the foot traffic and the customer base to potentially, maybe pay for these costs, if they're impacted, in different ways by it.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I'm fine with all of this being on for next week. Does anybody else have questions or concerns to raise to Rick Dale?
Great.
You've convinced us all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next up for discussion, we have the cabaret license for Sing Sing Kill Brewery.
And I will be turning off my camera.
Corporation Counsel Kahan.
Thank you, Village Manager Dettori. This application, first of all, I want to point out that we are now doing all these applications, the clerk's office is doing all these applications online, which is making life amazingly easier. Thank you, Maddie. Thank you, all the folks down in the clerk's office, because this is, if you look at the applications, they're marvelous now to look at. They're easy to fill out. I don't have to worry about what kind of cabaret they're actually doing because they actually type it in. It really looks great. This is a renewal essentially of last year's cabaret license. Same time, same dates. I believe it's from, I just will look quickly. It will be from noon until 2 a.m. Monday through Sunday. That's what the board granted last year. Everything else was fine. They passed the building inspection. There were no issues with the police department. We did get another completed application. That was for Sirenita's Lounge at 12 Croton. But I'd rather have the chief be here with regard to that one. There was at least one police report from that location. So that's something that we will put over until the early part of next year. But this one with regard to Sing Sing Kill Brewery, no issues here. We will get from them an updated license, liquor license, because theirs expires at the end of February, and an updated insurance certificate, which also expires in February. But I would simply ask that I'm prepared to put a resolution before the board next week to issue a cabaret license to Sing Sing Kill Brewery under the same terms as existed for the 2020 license.
This is great. The mayor recused herself. Stuart, I think Eric Gearity's on the call. Is there any reason that we might want to hear from him, or are we pretty much good to go?
It's really up to you folks. I have nothing to ask of Mr. Gearity. Otherwise, everything is under control, and I see no reason that this permit should not be granted.
Agreed. Jamie, do you just, well, Eric, you can hear me because you're on the call. Could you just let Jamie know if you want to say anything? Because I
raise his
echo
hand.
Stuart's words.
If you'd like.
Okay. Well, we'll just wait a second or so.
Okay.
I can't see anything on my end because I'm not one of the co-hosts. The mayor is. So, Jamie, you let us know.
Yes, I will let you know. He has not raised his hand.
Okay. So, we take that as I'm taking your echoing your words, Stuart. Good with this. Anybody else have any comments?
I'm good with it. Let's move forward.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
Thank you, folks. We'll have a resolution next week.
Thank you.
I'm back.
Okay, next up, as you know, we put together a schedule for so that we could do RFPs for our professional services. Next up on our schedule is we would like to be drafting an RFP for engineering consulting services. So we'd like to approach the board to consider a resolution to allow us to issue that RFP.
And folks, just to point out, is something that Jaime mentioned before, the current agreement with Kellard Sessions, who is the village's engineering consultant this time, expires on March 31. So what we would like to do is to get this RFP out in early January so that we can get responses back, have them reviewed, obviously get Paul's input, Jaime's input, Joe Agostinelli's input as to what would be needed to go into the RFP, because as Jaime mentioned, it would also include wetland consulting services. So we could get that done and put a resolution before the board, authorizing the issuance of the RFP for engineering consulting services, which would go into effect. The new contract would be April 1. Which would be just after the Kellard Session agreement concludes.
Sorry, I don't know what's wrong with me tonight. It's been a long day, I guess. Stuart, but there are pieces. So, for example, would would you all look and say, well, there's an RFP for colored sessions the way it is today. There's an RFP for the way we'd actually like it to be, which means we may want to have somebody else, like an individual in charge of wetlands. Like, how would you separate that? Is that something that you're looking for input on? I don't see this as, hey, the way we've done in the past is the way we should do it again going forward. So how would you suggest we go about that conversation?
Well, I think that one of those will be a discussion, you know, I want to obviously have with Jaime and staff and Paul to see if we want to do that. We may have some engineering consulting firms that we think are superb, but don't do wetlands. You know, that's simply not their wheelhouse.
Exactly.
And if that's the case, it may be that what we may want to look at is potentially 2 or maybe more RFPs, to certain areas. That way we can have, you put them out, and it may well be that you'll have one company will respond to, let's say you have 3 and they respond to all 3 because they basically are in all those areas. But another one may not. That also will afford the village the ability to say, okay, we like you for X, but we like this one for Y, and go that way. So there's no reason that absolutely can't be broken up to do that. Kellard currently, for example, does engineering consulting. They also do all the stormwater work. Again, that may be something that as we talk about it, we may want to consider breaking it up to just see what else is out there. Because as I said, there are specialists in every field. We may find a great engineering consulting firm that doesn't do, as I said, wetlands, but they do a lot of the other stuff that we need. So I think input from particularly planning department, building department, and the village engineer and the water department to that extent will be critical in seeing how we do that. So I think the resolution could be that it could be 1 or more RFPs for engineering consulting services to be issued, and that way we may do one, as I said, for wetlands and one for this. So we're not what we're not then doing is putting it out and only those firms that can do everything respond when perhaps a smaller firm that is very good in one field does not. So I think that's a very appropriate suggestion. We can certainly do it that way.
Thank you.
Stuart,
yeah,
I'm a little bit more the opposite of what Rika just mentioned, and this is the reasons why. Sure, my concern will be, there's a couple of concerns that I have. One, the coordination of all the consultants. Let's say we hired 3 consultants, for argument's sake. Who's going to coordinate that? 3 consultants. Instead of just coordinating 1, now we have to control 3.
So, yeah.
Wait, just let me finish, please. So now the other concern that I have is in a big project, sure, now it's not just the village that has to deal with 3 different consultants, but now the person who's doing the application, either as a homeowner or as a developer or as a whoever they may be, as a contractor that may be doing the work, now he may have to deal with 2 or more consultants, depending on the scope of the work they have. So to me, it's like it becomes too complicated. If we want to simplify the process, having too many consultants out there is just too much. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I have dealt with that. There's times that I deal with an engineering firm that they only do mechanical, the MEP stuff, but then I have to deal with other ones that deal with the structural stuff. I rather deal with someone that is just one company. It makes it easy for my end. It makes it easy for my job. I just send the guy who's in charge, send that email, send all the questions that I have, set up a meeting with them, go over all that stuff, and I'm done. Instead of now I have to coordinate a meeting with 3 different consultants. And again, to me, is the managed part. Is it Joe going to be managing that? Is it Jaime going to be managing that? Is it Paul going to be managing that? Sometimes may have to be a Stuart part of that as well. So now, to me, it's too complicated. But again, I'll defer that to to the staff, but that would be my concern, or that is my concern.
Trustee Quesada, I would like to say that this will probably be, as we put the RFP together, we'll get more clarity in terms of that, and certainly as we get the responses. I don't disagree that having too many consultants could cause unintended consequences, even if we benefit by select expertise, and you know, so there could be some confusion there. However, the way we've been doing this typically is we've had board representation in the process of selecting the consultants, so we can go forward with that if there are board members who would like to, you know, be involved with this. And then I think that some of these things, as we go through the process, will become I think a way forward that makes sense will open up based on the pros and cons of how we need to get the services, the right services and the right fit, and also maintain you know, a very, you know, less complicated structure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think you have your first board volunteer.
I don't want to make any assumptions on people's time, given the amount that they spend on certain things. So I'm just putting it out there.
I'll nominate him. I don't have a problem with that.
All right. Well, anyway, we'll note that.
We nominate other people for things. I'm loving this.
Well, Jenna, we learned a long time ago, if you brought the idea up in the firehouse, you ended up being the chairman.
We've all learned that. Or go to the
Yeah.
bathroom while the vote's being taken.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do not leave the room. Do not leave the room. So are there any more questions on the RFP?
No, I'm just glad we're doing them. I think this was a good idea. It's good practice. It's an all-around good idea. So very appreciative.
It's
of
proven
the
to
work
be
that's been done.
quite beneficial on many fronts.
Yeah.
Okay, so our final agenda item now is a claim filed by Zoila.
You want me to pronounce the name?
I was practicing in my head.
Cabrerayunga. Correct. This was going to be actually in exec. It does not have to be. It's a claim that's going to, I expect, to get resolved. It's an odd sort of claim. What occurred was that one of our police officers pulled over a car for a loud muffler. He went over to the car. The person in the car got out of the car, and when told to get back in the car, the officer went over to him. The officer unfortunately forgot to put the police car into park, so it rolled back and struck the Cabrerayunga car, which was legally parked and was literally doing nothing except parked in the street. Car suffered significant damage. Where the claimant is going to be somewhat concerned or distressed is that, frankly, the value of the car is less than the repairs. So what may well be offered, and what I expect to offer from my end, will be what is essentially the Blue Book value, which is less than the replacement value, but that's what that is. But it's an odd sort of set of facts. The officer actually thought the person he pulled over was drinking and driving. It turns out that his breathalyzer test showed that he was not. But as the officer reports, I approached the other car and I suddenly heard a large bang in back of me, and I noticed that my car had actually hit another car. So this is just notice to everybody, please put your parking brake on, no matter where you are. But this claim will get resolved. I've been in contact with the owner's son, who is acting as a translator, and I expect that this will get resolved. So I did want to let the board know that.
And what is needed of us?
Actually, nothing will be needed of you, because my intention is to have it settled for under $5,000, which is my pocket authority. And that way, if we can reach that resolution, the case's claim is settled. If it does not resolve for that amount, then they have the ability, if they wish, to bring an action. But I don't think that will happen. And that's all I got on that one.
And that's it, right? Do we have is there anything more before we make a motion to adjourn to executive session? Which I think we have executive
Do
session,
we
right?
still have something in executive session that we're going into? Because I thought this was it.
This was going to be an exec. I took this
Oh.
out, but I don't know if there was anything else. So
Yeah, I
if
don't
there's
know.
not, then
Oh, we're gonna be
Good.
done for 11 o'clock. I have only minutes left of this job that I love. You don't want to talk to me about something? I mean, make me.
Let's just meet an exec just for advice of Counsel, I guess.
No, it's okay. I'm only kidding. You guys can go to sleep. Go eat your dinner.
Yeah, eat dinner. That's actually the more appropriate action that's going to be taken. Victoria, how does it feel?
No, wait, no, don't. No, you're right. Sorry, it was for that. Sorry.
How does it feel, Victoria?
Bittersweet, mixed emotions.
Yeah.
We'll have exec items for you next week, okay?
Yeah, seriously. All for the whole year, we're up to like 1 a.m. of all the days that we didn't like come up with something. I'm a little disappointed myself.
Sure. Are you sure there's nothing else?
I'm not.
I'm just teasing.
Sorry,
you guys.
Victoria.
Thank you guys for humoring me. I appreciate it. And we
Thank
did our
you.
exec beforehand because I thought tonight might go kind of long and it gets tiring
Yeah.
for us to have thoughtful conversations at midnight, especially about important sensitive issues, which is why we did the early exec. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you,
early.
Victoria.
thank you all.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
All right,
Mayor.
guys.
Thank you, everybody.
I'm gonna go have
Good
my
night.
dinner too. This meeting is adjourned. See you next week.
Have a good night.
Okay, good night.
Bye-bye.